power's not coming on. Oh, I'm not pressing the right button. Okay, we're live. Okay, you might want to charge the other microphone to take over for this one. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to my medieval cooking party. I am the Contessa of the Creative Contessa, and tonight we are going to be exploring yet another 15th century Italian recipe. Lemon chicken, and this one is different probably from any lemon chicken dish you've ever had because it is made with almonds and almond milk. So I've never actually made this before. I've had my eye on this recipe for literally years, so I'm excited to recreate it with you. Almonds don't have nipples. Yeah, so yesterday some possibly good-natured smartass or ill-natured smartass, I don't know. I can appreciate a smartass, I just don't appreciate the ill-natured ones. Commented during yesterday's medieval story time about almond milk. How on earth was it possible to milk an almond? He thought he was being funny. You know, he said almonds don't have nipples, but I would suggest that the way they look on the tip, that looks a little nipple-like. Anyway, no, you. So yes, we will be making almond milk today, but we're going to be making almond milk with the chicken broth that is going to result from parboiling this chicken. So this is actually a multi-stage recipe, and if we get through this recipe relatively with faster than I anticipate, which is unlikely because you all always ask questions and you always ask good questions, but if we actually get through this recipe with any rapidity, then I do have a second recipe planned, another stuffed egg recipe, in which eggs are actually fried. So let me just camera a little bit positioned. Okay, very good. As always, if you have questions during the course of our medieval cooking party, then feel free to pop them in the live chat. Otherwise, I will just hold forth. And the usual format is if I'm in the midst of holding forth and you have a question, hold the question until I reach a natural pausing spot. It will happen, usually after about 5 minutes. And then I can better address questions. Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about our source for the day today. So we are once more returning to what is called now modernly the Neapolitan Recipe Collection. This was edited by Terence Scully and is easily available. You can buy it on AbeBooks. I think Barnes & Noble sells it. And this is actually a manuscript from the 15th century that is basically listed in an index of the contents of that manuscript as Cuoco Napoletano. And so this is presumed to be also based on other indicators in the manuscript that this actually reflects Neapolitan cuisine from the 15th century. Now, Naples in the 15th century was a thriving kingdom of its own, an independent polity. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with Italy in the pre-modern era, basically before the 1860s, Italy consisted of a large number of independent city-states and or just states. And Naples was a thriving cultural metropolis, basically. It had a court that everyone aspired to be like. People went there to make their fortunes. The sons of Alessandro Strozzi went to Naples and ended up being favored by King Ferrante there and ended up making their own fortunes. So the cuisine from such a culturally rich polity will therefore must also be excellent. And indeed, many of the recipes in this cookbook are quite delicious. Yeah. Oh, so lovely to see you. Twitchy, are you back? It's good to see you again. Ah.
Reptiles is on.
Oh, reptiles. Thank you for joining us this evening. So we're going to be making a recipe that is actually called lemon sauce for chickens or capons. Now, of course, as always, it doesn't just give us the recipe for the sauce. It gives us instructions for how to cook the chicken itself, because this goes hand in hand actually in this recipe. Now, for those who wonder what the difference between a chicken and a capon is, a capon is a rooster that has been gelded. And this is what they used to do before industrial farming and the horrors of industrial farming, this is what they did with roosters. You don't need a lot of roosters. And roosters can be very problematic if you leave them as roosters. And so they would not kill male chickens, they would geld them. And then those male chickens are called capons, and they would get wonderfully fat. And those were generally the chickens that were eaten because hens were allowed to live to a ripe old age so that they could keep laying eggs. For the most part, with a few exceptions, for the most part, hens were not killed to be eaten until they had basically stopped laying, until they had reached the end of their laying life. So it can be very hard to find capons in the modern world depending on where you are. So obviously, just substitute with a chicken, which in most places in the United States and Europe is probably just going to be a hen and not an old hen either, right? So we have here a charming little Korean. We're currently welcome to Daegu, South Korea, for those who are wondering about why it's, nighttime compared to where you are. And you can see that hand for scale. Chickens historically have not been huge. The Purdue chickens that we now get in many places in the United States are monstrous versions of their original selves, basically. So when these recipes call for a whole chicken, they're more likely calling for something this size. And yes, chickens in this era had all the beautiful feathers. They did not look like dinosaurs. So some of you have seen, I've shown you what chickens look like in South Asia. They basically look like fledged dinosaurs. No. European chickens were small and beautifully feathered. They didn't look like something out of Jurassic Park. So.
Twitchy is working on a whimsical layered cloak for a customer.
Ooh, nice, Twitchy. That sounds fantastic. A LARP on Sunday? You're going to a LARP today? That's awesome. Good for you. So let's go ahead. We're going to read through the recipe, and then we're going to talk about the components and what we should do at each stage. And we'll discuss some of the ingredients that are involved. This one's actually a really streamlined recipe, so the ingredient discussion will be relatively short. So I'll read through the recipe once, and then if you have questions, wait until I'm done with the first read through about anything, and then we will take questions. Here we go. Lemon sauce for chickens or capons. Get one or more chickens, capons, or cockerels that have been cooked in a little water. Take them out of the water and mount them on a spit. Then get peeled, well-ground almonds and temper them with the bouillon of the chickens. Then get lemon juice and mix it all together. Oh, I'll need the lemon juice from the fridge. Get the lemon, then get lemon juice and mix it all together with good spices and put it into a saucepan to cook a little, then pour it over the roast with a little fat. Serve it very hot. Okay. So on the outset seems very simple, but as for those of you who participated in medieval cooking parties before, you will note that there are many, many details that are simply excluded for whatever reason. So some of you have heard my lecture on why medieval recipes were probably so vague before. I'll go ahead and give it briefly again. It is unlikely that a collection like this, a manuscript from the 15th century or before, was aimed at the average home cook. In fact, there's no chance of that. What I think and what other scholars think, these sorts of collections of instructions, including dance manuals from this era as well, the thing for which the audience for which they were intended was actually a patron. The idea was that this collection of recipes could function like a resume. Here is what I can do for you as a cook, right? I know how to make all of these dishes, and I will provide some tantalizing information about how I might prepare it. Thereby, you can see that I prepare it differently from these other cooks, which is my theory as to why there might be actually variation between the same recipes for the same dish from the same region. It's like, oh, but he makes it that way, but I make it this way, but I haven't provided all the details. So you will have to hire me for me to make this for you. Right. That's one theory. The other thing that happens a lot, especially in the 15th century, there's this bibliophilia, bibliomania. is on the rise through the 14th, and it really hits its peak in the 15th century. Wealthy people are assembling larger and larger private libraries. They're collecting books. And one of the things they do to collect these books is actually just make copies of books that are in other people's private libraries. And so this, I have not actually looked into the origins of this manuscript particularly to see whether it is a library copy or if it actually has signs of being a presentation copy, but that does often happen a lot. Library copies though, especially if you're in like the merchant class, library copies tend to actually be much more prosaic in their presentation. There's a dance manual from the 15th century that has this it appears it's got at least 5 different copies of it floating around out there. And one of them is a library copy, and it looks like chicken scratch. It's hard to read it. It's really hard to read it. Unfortunately, it's one of the more detailed of the dance manuals, but it reads like some kind of Da Vinci Code nonsense. It really does. Anyway, okay. So let's go look at our recipe. So get 1 or more chickens, capons, or questions, comments?
Somebody wrote Dance Manuel. Picture of a guy.
Dance Manuel. Nice. Dance Manual from the 15th century. And so the 15th century is also where we start seeing an increase in the incidence of manuals in general. Cooking manuals, fighting manuals, dance manuals, instructions on how to do things. But also in many cases, the instructions are not detailed enough to really completely recreate the process being described, again, requiring you to actually hire the author of the treatise. In the 16th century, with the rise of the printing press, that's when we really start getting seriously step-by-step instructions in a wide array of fields. Okay, so let's look at line 1. Get 1 or more chickens, capons, or cockerels that have been cooked a little in water. So I haven't cooked this one a little in water yet, so we're going to cook it a little in water. Basically, what this cooking a little in water should do is create a bouillon, a broth that we will then use to make the almond milk. Right? So yes, in one part, it's practical because we're going to be poaching the chicken. And that was important because it was understood a lot of recipes that involve meat involve a poaching stage before you spit and roast it. And one of the theories for that is actually basically it's antimicrobial because, of course, refrigeration wasn't a thing unless you had a larder, and even then it wasn't the same as modern refrigeration. And even though meat was nearly always, especially in the case of chickens, freshly slaughtered, probably someone at some point realized that there were improved outcomes if you basically blanched your chicken first, or your meat first, in hot water before proceeding to roast it. So there's a couple of theories as to why a lot of recipes call for this. Obviously, medieval people did not understand about germ theory, but they understood about cause and effect. They understood that if you do A, then if you treat this food stuff in this manner, then the outcomes are better. Yeah. So we're using, this is my more medieval looking clay pot is currently occupied with the remnants of our last cooking party, the beautiful herb dish, the herb tart. The erbolata, but we're using a clay pot anyway. This is just a modern Korean clay pot. So we'll be using that because it does simulate a little bit more the actual medieval clay pot than a modern steel pan or pot would. So I'm just going to put some water in here. Yeah, that's right. Yep. Let me tell you. Exactly, Twitchy. Medieval authors wouldn't have had to fight with AI stealing their shit. Excuse my language. Sorry. The topic of AI stealing intellectual property is near and dear to my heart since my content gets stolen on a regular basis and used in AI generated videos. It's very frustrating. Okay, so I'm just going to, I have now filled the pot, put the chicken in the pot, put water in the pot. I'm going to just put this on the stove and I will light the fire. Now, a medieval kitchen would have for the most part, would have just basically had a fire kind of going all day from morning until night. And then at night, the embers would have been banked. They wouldn't have been completely put out and put under a curfew. So that the next day you could just easily start the fire again, basically. So this, having a modern gas range is really great. But, in the medieval kitchen, in a professional medieval kitchen, especially, meaning one of these great household kitchens, there would have been someone who would have just like specialized in fire management. They would have maintained the wood supply to ensure that there was always enough wood laid on, or charcoal if they were using charcoal for cooking. They would have managed the fire, created different locations on the hearth with different amounts of heat. And if, God forbid, if things actually went out, then they would be the people who would reignite it with a flint and steel. I actually have a replica medieval flint and steel kit, and I can start a fire that way. I haven't done it in years, so I'm super rusty, but I do know how to do it. I'd probably have to spend half an hour remembering the specific technique and getting it all back together, but I can do it.
You do what?
Okay, great. So while our chicken is in the pot and is poaching, basically, let's look at the next step. So once it poaches, it says take them out of the water and mount them on a spit. So most meat, when it is roasted in a medieval recipe, it's nearly always spit roasted. There are some exceptions there, but spit roasting was the most common way of roasting meat. And spit roasting is another sign that you have somehow have the leisure, or you can afford to pay someone to just turn a spit. And we do have visual images from the 15th century of a spit that is actually turbine driven, that there's actually a fan, a whole mechanism of basically iron rods strung together on a screw, and at the top there is actually a fan, and then the heat rising from the fire should drive the fan and then turn the spit. I've seen it depicted. I don't know if I've never actually seen a reconstruction or a reenactment of it, and I can't confirm that it was actually used, but they are depicted in 15th century woodcuts of kitchens. But also we see a lot of depictions of people just standing by the fire, slowly turning the spit, right? And it was a gruesome job. Being the spit boy in a kitchen was wretched because you had to be really close to the fire, so it was a very hot job. And it takes a long time. To spit roast a chicken is a long process. We found this out the hard way back in 2005, the first time we experimented with spit roasting in a medieval encampment. And man, Gunnar, God bless him, he sat there for 3 hours and spit roasted a lamb roast, basically. I mean, it's going to give you one of the most delicious, most flavorful things you can imagine. But, in the era before mechanized rotisseries, oof, boy. So I don't have a spit roast. I don't have a way to recreate really the spit roasting process here. So we are just going to roast this in the oven. But the point of this is that most medieval kitchens didn't have ovens, and they didn't roast things in ovens. They didn't roast meat in ovens. They baked pies and breads in the ovens. They didn't tend to bake meat in an oven like we do now. So, okay. Questions or comments?
Ursel, Bear, and Aaron and Wood are both on.
Ursel and Aaron, lovely to see you. So many of my peeps are here tonight.
Artie Farty says she is hot.
Artie, appreciate the compliment. Thank you.
Franz List said medieval life was probably horrible, even for the rich people.
Medieval life, that's an interesting comment. Medieval life was probably horrible even for the rich people. I think it's relative, and I think... So I travel. One of the other things I do is I travel a lot, all over the world. And I have seen the way people have lived in a variety of places. And I will tell you that I have seen people living in really horrific circumstances. So honestly, for rich people, it was pretty nice. One of the biggest myths about the Middle Ages is, of course, that it was dirty. And that's a complete misconception. Medieval people worked really hard to keep their spaces clean, very clean. And one of the reasons that it was not just a luxury option for them, it was a survival option. Because the theory of infection and contagion in the Middle Ages said that illness was born on the back of foul smells. That was known as miasma. And so medieval people across all levels of society did everything they could to prevent themselves from smelling bad and to prevent their homes from smelling bad. So there are all sorts of manuscripts that I've read, chronicles that I've read, manuals of health that I've read, how-to tutorials from the Middle Ages on keeping a good household. All of them advise sweeping out the home, wiping it down, sprinkling sweet-smelling herbs everywhere. So from that sense, it wasn't horrible in terms of, dirt. It wasn't horrible in terms of smells. The cities weren't as foul as people think they are. And I finally found out why there is this big disconnect between how medieval cities and towns actually were and how we think they were. And basically in the 19th century, a whole bunch of Victorian scholars and historians started writing all of these pejorative essays and papers and books decrying the horrors of the dirty, dark, violent, ignorant, benighted, superstitious Middle Ages. But the reality is that almost every single thing of which they accused their medieval ancestors was current in their own time. So for instance, Victorian, thank you for that, Michia, appreciate that. So for instance, in the 19th century, that's the Industrial Revolution. Things are getting really bad. That's probably the nastiest, most unpleasant time for humanity, honestly, is the Industrial Revolution and the places where the Industrial Revolution happened. To this day, places that are just now experiencing the Industrial Revolution in low-income developing countries or underdeveloped countries, life probably sucks really badly there. Because the Industrial Revolution introduced levels of pollution and stench and squalor that had never been seen before. It concentrated people into cities that were not designed for that level of population. And so towns and cities actually grew fetid and disgusting in the Industrial Revolution. And so historians looked around them, 19th century historians in England particularly, looked around them. And they looked at London and they looked at Manchester and they looked at Birmingham and they said, wow, this is really gross. It must have been worse before, because if it's like this now, we surely must be at the pinnacle of human advancement. So it must have been worse in the Middle Ages without looking at any evidence at all. But now we start looking at actual evidence from the Middle Ages, and what we find is that many towns and cities in medieval Europe had professional street cleaning crews that went out on a daily basis every morning and cleaned up the streets, just like many cities have now. We find that they did not just dump filth and waste into their rivers. In the 1390s, the Ménager de Paris, the goodman of Paris, advises his wife that if she wants good, clean water, she should go to the Seine to get it. I wouldn't go to the Seine now to get good, clean water.
The book is tagged.
The book is tagged. Okay. Goodman of Paris. If you're interested in checking out that really interesting how to manage a household manual from 1390s in France, the Goodman of Paris is tagged under the products, the shopping products. And I think we get a kickback if you click on that link and you buy the book. It's one way to support the channel. Anyway, so yeah, so I actually don't think medieval life was nearly as miserable as people think it was. And I think actually it was probably better in the Middle Ages than it was in the 19th century on many, many metrics.
And Twitchy says we have manuals on how and where cesspits should be managed.
Yes. Medieval people understood that you didn't just literally defecate in your backyard and just leave it out. They understood that. Towns and cities had anti-littering laws. And they were enforced. People were punished for it. How do we know? Because we have the records of people being fined and prosecuted for tossing their chamber pots out the window. So I know you're going to say, well, yes, that's evidence that people did it. Yes, but that's probably that because people were actively being fined for it, it means not everyone was. And there's actually incidents where some poor person is surprised and ends up with a chamber pot upended on his head from a window. And he's surprised by this because it wasn't common. And so it results in a violent altercation. If something is so common that it's a regular occurrence, people take measures to protect themselves, right? But there's this whole crime case I read from Burgundy from the 1420s where the daughter of the innkeeper gets lazy, and the case actually acknowledges she gets lazy. She didn't feel like doing the right thing and carrying the chamber pot down the stairs and emptying it in the cesspit. So she threw it out the window. It landed on this gentleman who was down below. He got so angry, he was enraged. I don't blame him. I think I'd see red too if I had someone else's fecal matter upended over my head. And he ends up actually going and beating her up a little bit, in quotes. That's what the court case says, which tells us that that is not normal. It was not acceptable. And he actually gets pardoned. He gets pardoned for that. Because her father says, yeah, you're right. She shouldn't have done that. All indicative that it was not normal and accepted for people to just toss their chamber pots out the window. But also, a lot of modern people in modern cities are tossing nasty crap out their windows on a pretty regular basis. And let's be honest, if they didn't have flushing toilets, yeah. Anyway, okay, diatribe over. Question.
What did they do with the poop then?
What did they do with the poop then? Okay, so medieval, almost every material in the Middle Ages had a use. It was a circular economy, and fecal matter, human or otherwise, was a highly valued substance for fertilizer, among other things. Thankfully, I don't think they used human fecal matter for wattle and for daub, but they did use horse manure for daub. So there was actually a job referred to as the gong farmer in the Middle Ages, and I think up until the early 20th century, I've actually read children in Italy, for example, in Italian cities, were actually collecting horse and donkey and cow manure from the streets and selling it as fertilizer. Right. So there was actually a gong farmer. He would actually go from home to home in a town or a village, and he would empty out their cesspits, and he would get paid for this. He would get paid to empty their cesspits, and then clever entrepreneurship. He would turn around and sell what he'd just been paid to empty to the farmers, so it would get used as fertilizer for the fields, among other things. So yeah, fecal matter was valuable. Urine was the Swiss Army chemical of the Middle Ages. And for those of you who are out there, you've heard this lecture before, I apologize, but here it comes again. I'll be brief. Fermented urine is a very useful substance. It can be used to bleach. It can be used to tan leather. It can be used to help in the dyeing process. It can be used to clean the lanolin and other substances off of wool. So urine was actually one of the most valuable substances in the Middle Ages from a pragmatic perspective, and from the range of production processes in which it was utilized, which is why tavern keeps would actually nail little clay urinals to the outside wall of their tavern, so that men who would need to relieve themselves would go and relieve themselves in the tavern's urinals. And then entrepreneurship for the win. Talk about vertical integration. The tavern keeps would then sell, the innkeepers would sell the urine to the tanners, to the dyers, to the to the people involved in wool production. And the reason I call it vertical integration is because, of course, the tavern keepers are getting paid to serve them drinks, which then make them have to urinate. So brilliant, just brilliant.
Andrew Thorpe says, piss is used in laundry, turns my good fertilizer after a while.
Yep.
And where I'm from in Yorkshire, we had muck lorries collecting waste until early 1970s from some houses.
Nice. I didn't know that. Andrew, thank you for sharing that. I did not realize that you still had muck lorries collecting waste from houses, but that makes sense because, it takes a lot of homes all over Europe especially, but even in America, not all homes always had plumbing. I grew up in a house that is now 170 plus years old. It definitely did not always have plumbing. My grandmother's house was built in 1808. It definitely did not always have plumbing. So the process of modernizing historical homes like that can actually be a slow process. Yes.
Takeda is on, and tell him we figured out how to unblock his other channel.
Takeda, we have unblocked you on the other channel. We found you hiding in the blocked list. I have no idea how that happened. So you can watch from your other account now. Okay, everyone. So welcome to my medieval cooking party. I know it doesn't sound like it when we're talking about fecal matter and urine. But in the medieval world, it really does all tie together. And the kitchen is absolutely, a medieval kitchen is absolutely a place where the circular economy applies. And so, anytime you have a recipe in a medieval cooking manual or cookbook or recipe collection that tells you to only use part of the ingredient, for example, you only use the yolks and not the whites. There is no way on God's green earth, hopefully still green, that the whites were simply disposed of. They would be used in another recipe that only used egg whites, or they could be saved and utilized for a variety of very utilitarian purposes. Unlike cooking today, where if, most people, they don't keep the egg whites. If they're making a dish that just uses the yolks, most people throw the egg whites away, which makes me sad. Yep. Okay.
So Andrew Thorpe also says, and we like time team, so I'm going to put this out there. If anyone wants a good reproduction pea pot, Trinity Court Potteries, aka Jim the Pot.
Ooh, I love Trinity Court Potteries. They are awesome. Yeah, I actually have multiple of my replica medieval cooking pots are Trinity Potteries.
Now after the pot pits, let's cook.
Right. Yeah, thank you for joining us, Andrew. I really appreciate having you in the live chat. Yeah, especially if you're in the UK or in Europe, Trinity Potteries, excellent replica pottery, very reasonable prices, quality, and reasonable prices, quality, and accurate replicas. So can highly recommend. In fact, the first medieval cooking pot I ever accidentally destroyed because I didn't think about thermal shock was a Trinity Court pottery pot. Yeah, good times, happy memories.
Lucia Make says, my mother was one of 13 children. It was a major celebration when the outhouse got a second hole so two sisters could go together in case of snakes in the outhouse.
Michia Makes, I appreciate you sharing that very relatively recent memory, right? Everyone thinks that outhouses are, not everyone, many Americans especially think that outhouses are a distant memory, but they aren't for some people. Yeah. I once attended a medievalist event, a reenactment event in Sweden at a reconstructed Viking village, and they only had outhouses, and there were 250 of us at this village for 5 days. And I will just tell you that those outhouses filled up very quickly, very quickly. So we absolutely had a very medieval experience at that event.
Have you attended? We're going over.
Yep.
Have you attended the original reenactors market? I don't think so.
The original, I will confess, I've not even heard of the original reenactors market. So I have not. I've only done small private events in the United Kingdom. I haven't done any of the big events in the United Kingdom. So I'm just going to turn over the chicken because the pot is little. I don't have one. I sadly don't have any of my replica medieval pots here. Hopefully that didn't put the fire out. So I'm just going to turn the chicken so that it can blanch on both sides. Okay. Yep. Right. Okay. So, let's go ahead and move on to the next part, because the next part I have to peel the almonds. So it says, then get peeled, well-ground almonds. Well, we haven't peeled the almonds yet. So while we wait for the chicken to finish doing its thing and making our bouillon, basically our bouillon, we're going to go ahead and peel the almonds together. And this kind of brings us to the topic of the circular economy. So for years, I have been making almond milk of various kinds. And one of the things that over which I always marveled was, what did they do with the almond peels? Because almond peels, yes, you can eat them. I don't recommend it. But nearly always these recipes call for blanched almonds, which means you remove the almond peels. They're not consumed in the dish. So I finally recently found a use, and in cuisine no less, in medieval culinary use for the blanched almond peels, the peels themselves. So apparently they would actually burn them so that they would turn black. They would grind them. Basically, I guess it's like a kind of activated charcoal maybe, and they would then use that to color food black. So in the medieval world, it was very important. I don't know why I'm doing this over here when you can see. In the medieval world, it was very important for food to be beautiful. Presentation was a massive part of the dining experience. I once read a really snobby, again, these 19th century Victorian historians were the worst. We have this book called The English Feast or something like that. What is it called? The snobby book? The catty snarky book? Hanson?
For what? Sorry, I was reading comments.
The catty snarky book about medieval English food. What's it called?
The Medieval English Feast.
The Medieval English Feast. If you want to read 19th century scholarly snark at its best, can recommend. The scholarship itself is pretty dodgy in places, and the judgment is absolutely inaccurate. But one of the things this gentleman says about his medieval ancestors is that their food was all just disgusting mush. Nothing could be further from the truth. It was not. And it was very important that food be presented beautifully, and that it be, cleverly presented so that maybe you wouldn't guess what it is at first. That's referred to as a subtlety, right? So that, you could take almond paste, marzipan, and dye it a variety of colors and build things out of it. You could take a chicken and decorate it up like a dragon. And even instructions in this manual, actually, this recipe collection has instructions on how to make a peacock that you roast and serve, breathe fire at the table. Detailed instructions. You could actually successfully make your peacock breathe fire following the instructions in this manual.
Ayla's here.
So Ayla, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So it was very important that food be pretty. We actually have books of etiquette from this era, from actually, we have books of etiquette. The earliest book of etiquette I have personally seen from Western Europe is from the 12th century. That doesn't mean that is the earliest one, though. That's just the earliest I have personally seen. But from the 12th century to the 15th century, there are manuals of etiquette about how to serve at table. Italy, France, England, Germany, right? Instructions on how to serve different kinds of dishes, how to cut it, how to carve it, the way in which it should be properly served, how it should be arranged. So yes, medieval people cared about how their food looked. Now, obviously, in this case, I'm talking anytime you're talking about manuals, mostly that's going to be aimed at the upper classes. But even in the lower echelons of society, at special times of year, like great feasts, like Christmas, even they took the time at those special occasions to make their food look nice, right?
Question: how did
Yes.
you loosen the skins?
Oh, that's a good question. Thank you for asking.
You squirt one sometime?
Yeah, there's an almond somewhere back there now. Right. So to blanch almonds, all you do is boil them in water for like 5 minutes, basically until the skin loosens. Then the skins loosen, and then you can just squeeze them out of their skins like that.
If you do it right, they squirt across the room.
Yeah, and if you do it right, you can actually, I guess, you could have an almond fight if you really wanted, if you were feeling frisky and you were bored in the kitchen.
Dangerous to hit each
However,
other.
let me,
Almond nipples.
yeah, those don't hit each other with the almond nipples.
Oh, Thumicor.
Tomikor, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So the thing about almonds were absolutely a luxury item. Most nuts were, because you have to remember that in a pre-industrial era, when you don't really have massive industrialized farming, most foodstuffs are going to be more expensive just out the gate. Tree nuts are absolutely going to be more expensive. They're only going to come at certain times of year. There's no massive California just kind of constantly producing almonds. So what that means is that almonds, almond milk, any dish that really has almonds in it is going to be a luxury item. It is not going to be something that the average household in the Middle Ages could afford on a daily basis. But we do know that quote unquote peasant households at special times of year did treat themselves. They saved up money in order to buy almonds for, say, the Christmas feast.
Thank you, Andrew.
Oh, Andrew, appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Towards the next Bitkin pot.
Towards the appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I miss my medieval pots, man. Medieval pots are awesome. So, almond milk, absolutely something that for most people was inaccessible. But for special occasions, we have evidence of even, farmers, peasants, artisan households that are not exactly wealthy, saving up and splurging at the special times of year. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The profuse, prolific, and pervasive poverty, profound and pervasive poverty that everyone associates with the medieval period is an artifact of the modern world, and generally is actually ties into the Industrial Revolution. That is when things start getting really dire. That is when the gap between rich and poor gets really, really massive. So for instance, recently a meta study was produced that basically examined the isotopes in the teeth and bones of cemeteries across Europe, and of cemeteries where the average people were being buried, not the tombs of the wealthy, right? Not the crypts of the wealthy. And one of the things they found is that from the Middle Ages to the 19th century, there is a sharp decline in the meat that is consumed by people on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum. They found that on average, the lower 80% of the population in medieval Europe ate 32 kilograms of meat a year, while by the 19th century, it's down to something like 19 kilograms a year. So there is absolutely a downturn in quality of life and standard of living from the Middle Ages to the Industrial Revolution.
You said that's a tiny mortar and pestle.
Yeah. This is my new pestle. I have to back up so you can see it. I have to lower it so it stays on camera. I don't even know if it all fits in camera. This is my new antique pestle. We're actually looking to rehab it enough so that we can use it, because this baby and this is here's my comically large. This is my comically large mortar, right? It's granite. Yeah, so we just purchased the new pestle, so we want to think you threw your back out. So we're looking to rehab it so that we can use it, because I will tell you, being able to use the full force of one's torso in pounding almonds is going to be, and spices, it's going to accelerate the process massively. Yeah.
I got you a huge pestle.
Yeah, we found it, and actually it was only 20,000 won, so that's like $15.
Very excited to find that.
We were very excited to find that. We definitely were.
I was looking for, but I was actually looking for a ironing stone for it.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Somebody said, "Good God." Somebody said, "Churn some butter."
Oh, drinking game. Someone suggested I should churn some butter. Okay, everyone, the Contessa drinking game.
That's a weapon of mass destruction.
It is a massive weapon of mass destruction. And it's a lot lighter than it looks, to be frank, because it is solid. It's solid wood, and it's quality wood, so it's not as heavy as you might think it is, but it's also not super light. So drinking game. If someone suggests that I am Amish or Mennonite, or what was the new one? A pilgrim? No. Quaker, pilgrim, witch, wizard. We got wizard the other day, didn't we? You should drink. If someone suggests I should churn butter, you should drink. A beverage of your choice. Obviously, you do you. I'm not going to encourage any unnecessary consumption of libations, so it could be tea, but that is the Contessa drinking game. There's a couple of others we occasionally get. Will you marry me? If someone asks me to marry them, then drink.
Jamie? But you can't just run away if you want me to pet you.
Yeah, I don't know if everyone heard that meowing in the background. That was one of our 3.
Yeah, we're not sure what type of wood, but it is definitely a hardwood.
Yeah, I am not certain what kind of wood, because again, so when I say we bought this antique pestle, Korea, like many places actually, Korea has different levels of antique stores. There's the expensive antique stores that do auctions and, sell pedigreed items. And then there's what I call the antique junk store. And it is a store with almost no floor room, because it's just covered in items from a variety of eras and of a variety of types, and everything is covered in dust. And you really do wonder how this person actually makes money. That's the kind of store from which we bought it. So it definitely did not have a pedigree. It definitely did not come with information. So I'm honestly not enough of a connoisseurs of types of wood to actually make any kind of determination as to its nature. And I know that comment opens itself up to oh so many cheeky comments. So I encourage you, if you wish to be pleasantly and cheeky in a friendly way, you may. Yes. Okay, so here we go. Almonds are ready to go. Back to our recipe. So we have our chicken here, and so now we should actually, it has finished parboiling, and so now we're going to mount it on a spit. We're not going to mount it on a spit. I'm going to put it in a roasting pan, and we're going to roast it to finish it. Let's see, how do I want to roast this thing? The pan in which I would normally roast it is currently, oh, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Okay, got it. Unfortunately, I do not have any of my replica cooking gear here, really. So I am having to cheat, so to say, and use a lot of modern equipment. Just gonna put the chicken in the mortar since we're going to be using the bouillon anyway. The bouillon, as it's called. Going to empty out the bouillon into this metal bowl. Like so. Yes. And then I'm going to, let me see. I actually need two different pots. Let me just read through the recipe again together with you. Get 1 or more chickens, capons, or cockerels that have been cooked a little in water. Take them out of the water and mount them on a spit. Get peeled, well-ground almonds and temper them with the bouillon of the chickens. Then get lemon juice and mix it all together with good spices. Put it in a saucepan to cook. So I do need 2 different pans. Okay. Well, because you will be watching me cook on the stovetop, I will save the nicer clay pot for the demonstration on the stovetop. And that means I will use one of my other roasting pans for the chicken. Okay. Just so you can see, here is the bouillon, the broth that resulted from parboiling the chicken. It smells nice and meaty. It's very nice. This is basically going to be an almond milk. We're going to make an almond milk with chicken broth. And that is really going to create a rich and savory thing. Okay, so because I am not spit roasting this chicken, where is it? There it is. Because I'm not spit roasting this chicken, I now have to think about certain things because I'm putting it in the oven. I don't want it to dry out. So I'm actually going to lard the skin, is what they call that in medieval English recipes.
What are you wearing?
What am I wearing? What am I wearing? I'm not wearing Chanel. This is actually a 15th century Florentine ensemble. It dates from the 1470s to the 1490s. This is called a cotta, C-O-T-T-A, because it's actually made of fancy striped silk. If it were made of a plain wool or a linen or a fustian, then it would be called a gamora. Right, so this is, and I'm dressed for at the home. I'm not wearing an apron. Oh my goodness.
You're not wearing an apron.
I'm not wearing an apron.
Oh.
Okay, apron. This is the way a lady, capital L, a patrician, member of the patriciate, would have dressed when at home. But if I were to go outside, then there would be other layers that I would put over top of this to, display my family's onore, the wealth and power and reputation of my family. But if I were a serving woman, servant of some kind, or a laborer, then I could go out dressed in just this layer. But as a lady, capital L, I should not. There should be at least 1 more layer, possibly 2 more layers over top of this. But we're at home, we're in the kitchen, and I'm cooking, so it's okay. Okay, question.
From corn dude.
Yes.
Did most women wear them, and how many would they have?
That is an excellent question. Did most women wear, what them is this gown? Is that the them?
Yeah, the gown.
Yes. In Italy, all across Italy in the 15th century, this or something similarly shaped was the base layer, basically. These bottom 2 layers are the essential layers that everyone wore. all women wore. Now, how obviously not all women, maybe not obviously, I shouldn't say that. Not all women would be able to afford silk, of course. That would have been the upper crust of society, but it would have been this shape. On the lower levels, it would have been made of wool, possibly fustian, which is a linen cotton blend. And there is a little tiny bit of evidence possibly made of linen, but the evidence on that is the jury on that, whether these kinds of things were regularly made out of linen, is still out. But yes, this is basically the same layer for all classes of society, including women working in the fields, right? And this dress is super convenient. To be able to work in the fields, all I would have to do is kilt it up over a belt, and then my legs are completely free, the skirts aren't dragging on the ground, and I've got freedom of, look, complete freedom of movement, right? So it's not restrictive at all. So yeah, women of all classes of society dressed this way, with the exception of nuns, members of the convent. They had their own dress codes and their own layers and their own clothing. Twitchy, though, I don't know if Twitchy, have you been looking at all into the Italian orders and the regulations for their clothing? We know that when women entered the convent in Italy, we know that they went in dressed in a gown like this because one of them has actually survived from the 1460s, belonged to Osanna Andreazzi, member of a very powerful family in Florence, or I'm sorry, Milano, in the sort of Duchy of Milan. And she entered the convent as a 13-year-old novitiate. And the dress that she was wearing when she entered the convent ended up preserved. She ended up basically being beatified. She was kind of on her way to sainthood. And so the gown that she wore as this prepubescent young lady, because she was still flat chested, the dress has no accommodation for any kind of breasts at all. So this prepubescent young lady's dress ended up being treated like a relic. And so pieces of the skirt were cut away, and all the sisters after she died basically took pieces and kept them. But the upper part from about the thighs up and some parts of the sleeves survive. So it actually gives us a clue as to how these kinds of dresses were made. And I actually have on this channel, I do in fact have a project vlog about making one based on her gown, the construction methods from her gown. And it's 2 hour and 10-minute long, the whole thing, making a 15th century Italian Renaissance gown or something like that. Yeah. Okay. So I have now larded the chicken, which is to say I have rubbed it in butter. In medieval Italian kitchens, they did use butter sometimes to lard things. They also used lard. They also use lard to lard meat. And larding meat means basically to rub it in the fat so that it stays nice and moist during the roasting process. Now, if it were being spit roasted, it would be turned, and one of the spit boys' jobs, or the spit woman's jobs, there's actually depictions of women spit roasting in their own private kitchens from Taquinum Sanitatis. And so one of the jobs of the spit operator is to actually baste the meat as it's turning, to regularly baste it, both from its own drippings and sometimes from other fats, depending on the flavor you want.
Oh my God,
Yep.
I missed so many comments.
Yep. Okay.
Are you a pilgrim?
Am I a pilgrim? That was it. That was the one. Are you a pilgrim? Drink, everyone.
Where's your recipe from?
Yes, good question. So for those just joining, we are working from a collection of 15th century recipes from Naples. And if you want to actually get this book for yourself, this is edited by Terence Scully, the Neapolitan Recipe Collection. This is a lovely compendium for several reasons. One, he provides the transcription of the original Italian recipes in their original language. He then has a chapter where he comments on each recipe, and then he provides a translation.
Say goodbye to Andrew Thorpe.
Oh, Andrew, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Thank you also for that lovely super chat. I hope to see you again. Right, so that is what we're working with today. We are making lemon sauce for chickens or capons, which also provides some scant instructions for how to cook the chicken itself. Right. Okay, now you'll notice doesn't say anything about salting, and there's actually a debate in the historical culinary world, especially medieval cuisine, about whether one should salt while cooking, because the recipes almost never make mention of it. And so there's one school of thought that no, they didn't use salt while cooking. Salt was a luxury item, and it was actually placed on the table in a salt cellar that could look very much like this replica salt cellar by Todd Cutler. No, he does not sponsor the channel, but he has awesome stuff. So yeah, this is a replica salt cellar by Todd Cutler. And so you can imagine just how valuable salt was if you're going to serve it in something this beautiful. So the idea is that people could salt their own food to taste. However, for those who actually know anything about cooking, cooking with salt during the process is going to have different outcomes than not salting it and just adding salt as a flavor enhancer at the end, because salt is not just a flavor enhancer. It impacts other kinds of chemistry that happen in the cooking process. So this is where, we as the reenactor, the living historian, the experimenter have to decide, is salt not something with which they cooked? Or is it because it's not mentioned? Or is it not mentioned because it was so common that they didn't feel like wasting, or they didn't see a need to waste valuable parchment, valuable vellum, and valuable ink, and valuable scribal skills, because you had to pay a scribe to actually, produce these manuscripts, on something that everyone knew to do. So that's the debate. That is the debate. And it is a way to get adherents, or followers of the historical cookery path to actually probably end up in a street brawl like interaction, to get, to have one of them suggest that they always use salt for cooking and the other will say they didn't. And before you know it, everyone was kung fu fighting. So then I have to decide, am I going to salt this or not? And yes, I'm going to. I am going to, because this is not being spit roasted. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and put our, isn't it cute? Isn't that just so adorable? This little tiny chicken. I'm just going to go ahead and put this in the oven. And medieval ovens, many kitchens did not have ovens. Most kitchens didn't have ovens, not just many. Most medieval kitchens did not have ovens. Households that had an oven, generally the oven was in a separate building, usually outside, and with good reason, or in a separate part, because you didn't want to put a giant furnace attached to the building where you actually lived, because then it could set your building on fire. So generally ovens were in other parts of a compound in the case of the wealthy, but most towns had communal ovens. And the baker was not someone who made cookies and pies and tarts. No, the baker was the person who operated the oven and who generally had the license from the town to operate the communal oven. And then the baker would actually charge people to bake their baked goods. So people would make their own bread and then they would bring the bread to the baker. The baker would then bake it for them. People would make pies. They'd bring them to the baker would bake them for them, and they would pay him to actually do the baking. So a pastry cook, a pastry chef in the Middle Ages also doesn't do baking. They literally, all they handle is, they don't do bread either. All they did was handle the pastry. They made pastry dough for pies. They also made pasta, because in the Middle Ages, there is no real separation between pasta and pastry dough. They're all part of the same sphere of influence, shall we say. Yep. Questions or comments, Hanson?
Ayla said, how would they preserve things? Salt is used so much for that now.
Yeah, that is a brilliant question. Okay, how would medieval people preserve things? So salt was absolutely used as a preservative. Salted meat was salted meat, salted fish. 100% a way of preserving foods in the Middle Ages. It's one of the reasons that salt was so valuable, is that it was so essential. People think it was valuable because it was rare. No, depending on where you are, it wasn't rare. But it was valuable because it was essential to being able to civilization. I mean, there are people who have written entire dissertations on how civilization has only been made possible because of salt. So yeah, salt was absolutely a thing. They would actually, I'm actually going to go ahead and start pounding this while we have this chat about salt. Salt was, salt was absolutely,
Jesus.
what?
Okay. Haas is on.
Hi, Haas.
Tanya Rowden's on.
Tanya, lovely to see you.
5 gift memberships.
Oh, thank you, Tanya. Appreciate that. So salt, what they would do is they would actually put the salt in a barrel and they would layer it. There'd be a layer, some salt, they put in meat, salt, meat.
Like suddenly old.
Do we just now have a glamour glare? How?
Probably.
Oh, did none of you observe that we have a glamour glare?
Sorry. Is that better?
So yeah, they would just layer, and the same thing for fish, right? The same thing for fish. They would actually salt in the barrel, layer of fish, salt in the barrel, layer of fish. Drying was also, depending on your climate, people who lived in very arid places, especially people who lived in the Arctic Circle where it gets very dry in the wintertime, they would air dry fish and meat. They would also smoke dry things. So smoked meats were not smoked in the Middle Ages. Meats that were smoked, or any, meats or fish that were smoked. Sausages were often smoked also. They were hard smoked. It was like jerky. It wasn't like now where we've got this yummy, tender barbecue that's been smoked for 24 hours and it's succulent and it's juicy. It was basically smoked hard. And the smoking wasn't about the flavor. That was possibly a side benefit to have a nice smoky sausage. The smoking was about the drying process, because especially in moist climates, you needed the smoke to dry the product out, or it wouldn't air dry, it would just rot. So yeah, meat and sausage was often smoked to dry it, and there's a sausage recipe in this collection. Actually, I just read that the other day. There's a sausage recipe, or read it again. There's a sausage recipe in this collection that is specifically for summer sausage. And it also tells you how to make it if you don't want to smoke it hard. Okay.
Okay. So the video's much better. Yay. So, where'd that go? Put the salt on. Do you wash the salt off when you cook it?
Yes. So if you are using salted meat, there are actually recipes from the 14th and 15th century that allude to using salted meat. They say if you're going to use salted meat, then you should actually boil it first, to parboil it to get the salt out, because they acknowledge that it would be too salty. And that plays into the theory about not cooking with salt. I once read an essay that claimed, and possibly reasonably so, that the reason that a lot of these recipes for stews especially don't call for salt is because they were using salted meat, so they wouldn't need to add salt. That's a theory as well. Yep. So if you were using a salted meat or a salted fish, there are recipes that instruct you to first soak them to get the salt out. And again, I'm pretty certain that they would not throw away that salty water. I think they would probably take the salty water and they would evaporate it to get the salt back. You were laughing, handsome.
What are you crushing?
We are making, just to bring you up to speed, we're making a 15th century Italian lemon chicken. I'm currently crushing almonds in this mortar and pestle, because this lemon sauce is actually made with crushed almonds. So let me read that part of the recipe to you. Get peeled, well-ground almonds. We're now grinding them well. And temper them with bouillon of the chickens, right? So here we have, this is the bouillon of the chicken. This is basically the water in which we poached the chicken, and it smells really nice. We may have poached it a little too long. The broth might be richer than it's supposed to be. You all were asking me good questions and I got distracted. So, because, that's the thing about these recipes, you may or may not have noticed. There's no mention of timings. It just says at the beginning, get one or more chickens that have been cooked a little in water. What's a little? What counts as a little? I personally think it should probably be until your broth actually, because the bouillon is being used as part of the sauce, that it should be until your bouillon at least has some flavor. But, you know, what is cooking a little? So that is...
Box, the poll has a good question. Can you share the sources you use? Because you've got a whole bunch of new people on here.
Yes, yes. So today's recipe, specifically for this one. So for those of you who are supporters, if you're a patron, if you're a channel member, if you're a Facebook subscriber, you have access to my private Creative Contessa Discord server, where I share almost all of my resources, all of my sources, right? And I share papers, digital papers I find, digitized books that are great resources for doing this research. I also have shared there my personal private library catalog, that is, yes, because I have a massive, what I think is massive, personal research library filled with all kinds of very hard to find esoteric books on history. And so you can actually peruse my library catalog and see what it is I have that you might like to check out at your local library. But today's recipe comes from a manuscript that has been dated to 15th century Naples, and it has been edited by Terence Scully in this book called the Neapolitan Recipe Collection.
Cuoco.
Yeah, Cuoco Napoletano. Yeah, Cuoco Napoletano, the Neapolitan Recipe Collection. Now, as always, caveat lector, I am a professional translator. That was my original career before the machines ate it. So I am very picky about translations, and Italian is one of my languages, so I am able to go back and look at the original Italian when there are issues that I find with the translation, when I wonder about the choice of a word. So yeah, if you have the ability to actually double check translations, I always recommend it. You know, until recently anyway, we translators were humans and can make mistakes or perhaps make an interpretation that isn't as accurate or authentic as it could be.
And just because it's amusing, somebody said she's crushing the nuts of every man that broke her heart.
Nah.
And you're
let me be frank, I'm the heartbreaker. Anyway, yes, handsome.
And you're really freaking out the guy on shrooms.
Oh, well, yeah, maybe this isn't the show for you if you're being influenced by psychedelics.
Ursula Bear has how to find the Discord channel.
Oh, I will post again. I will make a post, everyone, on for my members, my channel members, my patrons, and my Facebook subscribers. I will make a renewed post. It should be, Ursula, you're a channel member, right? It should be under posts. If you go to the community posts and go to members only posts, the link is there. But I might have to post a new link because it expires every 2 weeks. So yeah, Handsome, do you think you could go to the Discord server and get the link and make a community post for the members only peoples?
Oh, my phone is charging. So no.
Okay, no. Well, I'll go ahead and I will, after this live stream, I will go make a new post with the new invitation so that all the people who have just recently become members or patrons can join the Discord server. It's a really great place. It's a really supportive place. It's a fun place. We share our frustrations and our triumphs in historical recreation. We share resources. We share knowledge. You know, when I have a question, I go to Takeda there. If it's about metal or wood, he's the man, and we get great answers. So yeah, it's a fantastic resource, and it's a great resource because it's a great community, not just because of me.
And so people can see the comically large pestle again.
Yeah, comically large pestle. This is what I should be using in here. This should be on the ground actually, and I should just be hammering out all of my frustration. But we just bought it from an antique store, and it needs a little bit of rehabbing before I want to use it on food. I would be perfectly happy to use it as a weapon right now, but I wouldn't want to use it on food at the moment. Yeah. So let me just show you our progress. There we go. So today's recipe is lemon chicken, and I thought I might discuss a little bit about the history of lemons because it's quite interesting. You might think that lemons have existed for tens of thousands of years, and you would be wrong. They are actually a recent hybrid, relatively recent hybrid. And they're a hybrid of a hybrid, as far as I understand it, of citrus fruits. So they are basically, it seems, a combination of a pomelo and a citron, if I recall correctly. Citron is one of the two fruits with which they were hybridized, from which they were created. Citron is it kind of looks like a lemon, except that on the inside there's only very little actual fruit and it's a lot of rind, which is probably why citron was candied, eaten only as a candy. And so lemons basically seem to have their origin, maybe current theories are South Asia, India. The Greeks are the first ones from Europe to encounter them. When Alexander the Great makes his way eastward, he encounters them in Persia, apparently. And then eventually lemons make their way, when he made his way eastward into Asia, he also made his way westward, but not into Asia, when he made his way eastward into Asia, he encountered lemons. And whether or not he brought them back, or not he, but his people brought them back, his followers, his armies brought them back, it's kind of unclear. But what is clear is that they have found lemon tree pollen dating to the 1st or 2nd century BC in the Mediterranean, in Rome, basically in the Rome area of the Roman Empire. So that shows that there were lemon trees there, not just lemons. But they aren't mentioned very much in ancient Roman sources. So it seems that maybe they were a luxury item in ancient Rome, if they were used at all. The word lemon actually comes from the Arabic, which they think comes from a Tamil word. So by the Middle Ages, though, there are lemon trees are growing in the Mediterranean. They can be substituted with bitter oranges. A lot of oranges in the Middle Ages were not sweet. They were bitter. And so very often you'll find recipes that say take lemon juice or orange juice, because they were very close. They were very, very similar. Oh, no, that was it. Sorry. A lemon is a hybrid between a bitter orange and a citron. That was it. Right. So in the Mediterranean, lemons were by the Middle Ages, were available pretty commonly. But of course, the further north you go, the further you get from the citrus trees themselves, the more they became a luxury item. But lemons were absolutely exported all over Europe. And you do occasionally see them as a luxury item appearing in inventories and expense accounts in the 15th century. But it would not have been something to which your average everyday person in 15th century England could have afforded. They would have had access, technically, if they'd had enough money, but they couldn't have afforded it. But the Mediterranean, most of these products grow in the Mediterranean. So, and if any of you have been to the Med, to Italy, or Mediterranean Italy, France, Adriatic, Croatia, you will have seen lemon trees. They're everywhere. Yesterday we went to the Daegu Arboretum and we saw giant lemons. These were, really like the size of my head size lemons. They were crazy big. I really wanted to taste one because I wanted to know if there was any difference between a normal size lemon and these giant lemons. Food preservation. So that was the other question. What other kinds of food preservation? So sugar does not start getting used for food preservation until the 16th century, when suddenly it starts getting used to preserve all manner of fruits. That's where preserves really get their rise, right? Marmalades and whatnot. Because before the 16th century, sugar was a very, very, very expensive, highly luxury item, and it was not used in large quantities. It was too expensive. But then after the Portuguese basically set up their own sugar plantations in the Atlantic islands that they basically conquer and settle in the 15th century, that's what gets Portugal basically to the top of the ladder for the 15th and the 16th centuries. Then sugar becomes much more common and much more affordable. And Europeans decide that they can use it to preserve a large number of fruits. And they do. They also start eating just sugar. By the time of Queen Elizabeth, there's a whole course in upper crust households, a whole course of a meal that is nothing but sugar paste that has been molded to be beautiful objects. And they would just go retreat to this separate room and just eat sugar. Just sugar. The beginning of the end for Western dentistry, or for Western oral health, oral hygiene, I guess. Okay, show you where we're at. And the reason this is taking longer than it really should is because I have neighbors and it's Sunday evening, so I don't want them to hate me. But if I were able to use my giant pestle, this would take no time at all. Questions or comments, Hanson?
What are you blending?
I am grinding almonds, right? And this is for the lemon sauce. So it actually says once this is ground, I'm going to go ahead and start adding a little bit. It says to temper it with the bouillon, and tempering is basically just adding a little bit and mixing it in, right? You don't want to overdo it, because if you add, as you're making, this is also how almond milk is made in the Middle Ages. If you add too much liquid, then it just becomes a slurry and you can't actually really control the mixing. It becomes almost impossible to grind the almonds, but adding a little bit of liquid allows you to start extracting the essence from the almonds to make a yummy almond milk. But what's interesting about this recipe is it says that it should be well ground. So we want to make sure it is very well ground. And then it says nothing about straining out. Yeah, this is a full-size pestle.
Just gonna keep it out. Getting new viewers.
Keep getting new viewers who want to see the full-size pestle. Yeah, so in depictions of medieval people using mortar and pestles in Europe, and actually in Korea as well, the mortar is on the ground. And they've got that giant pestle, and they're using their entire force of their entire body to achieve the desired result. So it goes much more quickly. But I don't want to yet use our new pestle because we just bought it and it needs a little help to make it what I would call food friendly. And we did clean it, but it's got some cracks on the end because the wood has dried, and I want to plug those cracks before we start using it for food, because I don't want food to get into those cracks.
Thanks, Litz Plumber.
Oh, thanks, Litz Plumber. Really appreciate that. Lovely to see you're back. So I'm just going to add a little more of our bouillon, or broth, as we might call it, to the mortar. You can see as I grind, it starts to become more of a paste. Now, the interesting thing about this recipe is that it says nothing about straining out the almonds. And so I'm going to take that literally. I'm going to interpret this as actually being something that's very much like Persian fezanjan, where the ground nuts are actually left in the broth and become part of the body of the sauce, the thickener of the sauce. And why am I going to do that? Because there is another recipe in here that is pomegranate chicken that, with the exception of the pork belly, the rendered pork fat that is used in it, it is basically chicken fezanjan. And so it's very clear that there were direct culinary influences between Persia and Middle Eastern and other kinds of Middle Eastern cuisines and Italy in the 15th century. So it absolutely tracks to me that there would be an Italian recipe in a very international harbor city like Naples that would basically have a lovely thick almond sauce for a roasted meat. Questions, Hanson?
Is this a recipe or a workout?
Is this a recipe or a workout? Well, my dear friends, this is what we call slow food. But the reality is that that food preparation before the 20th century was very labor intensive. We now have appliances to do all this work. And there's a reason that it used to be that 100 years ago, a husband buying a washing machine for his wife was actually a considerate gift, right?
We have one of those as well.
We have a millstone, but they don't seem to, it seems that they did not use millstones for this purpose. And the reason is that you wouldn't want to use, what was it someone called that thing? A cairn, a quern. There's a reason you wouldn't want to, but it's not really, because it's, anyway, there's a reason you wouldn't want to use that for this application, because in this, you know, the almonds have been soaked, so they're soft. They're going to get, it's just going to end up all stuck inside the striations that actually allow the grinding stone to work. So that's why I'm 100% certain that they've used mortars and pestles for this, rather than a, you know, one of those mill stones that every kitchen had them, right? Every kitchen had them, but it just wouldn't have worked for this application.
What does the broth consist of?
The broth is nothing but the bouillon of the chicken. So literally the first thing we did was blanch the chicken in water, and then the chicken is taken out and roasted. It's roasting in the oven right now. It would have been spit roasted. I don't have a spit roast. I don't have the way to replicate a spit roast here without getting arrested for setting things on fire. It's in the oven, but basically just the cooking water from blanching the chicken or poaching the chicken is the bouillon, but it's just, oh, it just smells so nice. It really does. Okay. A little more grinding. But yeah, in the pre-electrification world, in the pre-20th century world, you know, there were a lot of these tasks were just, they were manual, they were labor intensive, which is why kitchens had to have lots of people working in them, because you had someone whose sole job was to grind things, right? Whether it was pounding spices or pounding almonds or handling the grinding of rice into flour in some cases, grinding breadcrumbs, right? There was someone their whole job was all day, every day. That's all they did in a well-organized, large medieval household kitchen. So yeah, there's a reason we call this slow food. But, you know, honestly, why, if you're going to, isn't it better that the things you naturally do in your day to accomplish, to make your food, to make your clothes, to clean your house, right? Isn't it better that you get your exercise that way than paying for a gym membership and having to go somewhere to work out? There's a reason that in most pre-industrial revolution societies, you don't need to have a gym to get your workout in, and it's only the upper crust who need to find a way to maintain their level of fitness. Okay.
What timeline are you?
So we are currently, this recipe is from 15th century Naples, and I am dressed in 1470s to 1490s Florentine clothing.
It's like making meth. No. I'm not sure meth is good slow food.
I mean, meth is...
Wait, that's
what?
a good question.
Oh, good.
Would you take your grains, etc., to the miller?
Yes, that is an excellent question. Would you take your grains to a miller? Yes, generally, if you were going to grind a large quantity of flour, then yes, you would take, most people would take their grains to the miller, and they would pay the miller. That was the miller's job. The miller owned a mill, and they were paid to grind other people's grains. They did not, it's not that they didn't generally grind the grain and then sell the flour. Other people brought their grain to them, and it was ground for them. So yeah, that is absolutely what would happen. Now again, in a really large household, in an estate that might have its own mill, then you don't have to do that. But you know, in the case of Italian city-states, for instance, Florence, most of those palazzi can't really have their own mills. So there would have been a mill out by the river or something. It probably would have been, it could have been water driven, so it could have been a water mill, or it could have been an animal driven mill, so where you actually have oxen or donkeys, asses as they were often called, pulling, you know, basically grinding the millstone. Windmills were actually not so necessarily, most of the windmills people associate with the Netherlands weren't grain mills. They were water drainage systems. They were keeping the land drained. They were keeping the polders drained so that they could actually have more farmland in the Low Countries.
Thank you to everyone. You're getting great comments.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate all these great comments. But yes, windmills were also sometimes grain mills, just not always. You can't assume that if you see a windmill that it was for milling things. It might actually be for draining swamps. And there were also, the Middle Ages was before the frickin' Renaissance, the Middle Ages was an era of massive technological advancement, right? Medieval people invented the horizontal loom. The Romans didn't have the horizontal loom. They had the vertical loom. Horizontal looms allowed fabric to be produced much more quickly in much larger quantities than a vertical loom did. And also wider. You could make much wider fabric with a horizontal loom, especially if you had multiple weavers, weaving it instead of the narrow looms. Mills. Water power is a thing in the Middle Ages. They're using water power to drive sawmills. They're using water power to drive hammer mills. They're using water power to drive fulling mills. So, it is an industrial revolution of sorts that happens in the Middle Ages, but bizarrely, it's a green revolution.
When did water wheels come into use?
Oh, God, the earliest... And water wheels came into use in the Middle East, at least, and possibly in East Asia as well, like in
the Romans.
3000, 4000 BC, long time ago, very long time ago. Water mills are actually possibly one of the, as far as I understand it, maybe one of the earliest mechanized technologies, power technologies, water power, but power is still power. Yeah, they had water mills long, thousands of years. Humans are clever. Humans are lazy, and that's not a bad thing.
First windmill. Same.
First windmill. I'm pretty certain I've seen references to windmills in the Middle East thousands of years ago. Granted, ancient history is not my particular specialty. I have some knowledge of it, but it's not my primary area of expertise and research.
Here's a weird question.
Okay.
Did all these water-based machinery produce lots of wastewater?
They did not. Yeah, so that's a great question. This water-driven technology, did it produce wastewater? Doesn't seem to, because they basically would put the water mills right on the stream run. So the water from the stream or river would just flow through the mill and keep going. The mill itself, it depends on what they were doing, I suppose, whether it would produce pollution, pollutants or not. If you're grinding grain, probably not. If you're fulling fabric, it depends on how clean the fabric is when it went in. But usually by the time you're fulling wool fabric, it doesn't really have anything bad left in it to pollute the water. So it was relatively clean. It was much cleaner, much cleaner than factories were to become.
Your strings are kind of falling into the pestle a little bit.
Oh, well, no, but so this pestle is so deep that it's not an issue. You're talking about this, my lace? Yeah, the mortar is so deep that it's not an issue.
Yeah, technically electricity nowadays is still made from water mills.
Well, it can be.
The dams that are doing
Yeah, we have hydroelectric. Yeah. Hydroelectricity is great. Okay.
So Sue Starling still grinds grain.
Oh, very cool. That is awesome.
Twitchy said the UK still has a lot of mill houses today.
Yeah, Germany has a lot of mill houses as well, though most of the ones I saw were no longer in operation. But they're still there. And the wheel still turns, but they're not grinding things in them anymore, I guess was my point.
Something that you'll want to talk about.
Okay.
Alex Wiggins says, well, you know what's funny? When I was in school, I hated history, but I love it now.
Yeah, that's a great comment. So the comment was from Alex? Yes?
Alex Wiggins.
Yeah, Alex. That is very fair. You hated history when you were in school, but you love it now. You know why? Because in school, they teach history in the most egregiously dull manner and unrelatable manner possible. They don't, at least when in any curriculum I've observed, either directly by participating as a pupil or by tutoring other people or our own children, right? History was dull because it wasn't presented like a series of exciting stories about real people's lives because they didn't present anything about daily life in any historical period. So it's unrelatable and it's tedious. It's battles and treaties, battles, plagues and treaties, right? But they never bother to teach anything about the way people lived their daily lives, about the food, about the clothing, about how they interacted, the games they played, the music they listened to, the things that make humans human, right? They never bother to teach that. So of course it's boring. Who cares about the Battle of Hastings and Magna Carta and Henry VII winning the War of the Roses, and a series of dates doesn't connect. No one connects to it. Most normal people anyway don't connect to a series of dates, but they connect to real people's stories. They connect to the way people live their daily lives, finding the similarities, finding the common ground. That is what makes history interesting to me. That's why I'm much more interested in daily life, in technology that people used on a regular basis, rather than memorizing, the royal dynasties and all of their descendants and, battle after battle after battle. None of that is, history is taught badly. That's why.
Could you combine other dried fruit with this? Jonas Patsos keeps asking.
I'm sorry, what?
Jonas Patsos? Jonas asks, could you combine other dried fruit with this recipe?
Question is, could you combine other dried fruit with this recipe? I mean, you absolutely could. And there are absolutely medieval recipes from across Europe that utilize dried fruit, especially figs and dates and raisins of Corinth, so currants, right? Yes, absolutely. We have plenty of recipes where there are sauces that involve raisins, where there are roasts that are stuffed with those kinds of dried fruit. Especially in Northern Europe, figs and dates and raisins would have been a luxury item. Currants, especially because currants would, come from the Mediterranean. But yeah, absolutely. Dried fruit, 100%. Also a way to preserve food. Drying is dried fruit. So yeah, we have lots of examples of dried fruit being utilized in sauces and also as stuffing inside of roasts. Lots of examples.
Johanna Dinsdale from 100 for 2 years. Thank you, Johanna.
Oh, thank you, Johanna. Appreciate that.
Oh, drink. You're not Amish.
Drink. I'm not Amish. So many ways to know I'm not Amish.
Johanna says they're a Canadian therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering what the closest thing they had to therapy was.
Yeah, so you're talking about psychotherapy, confession.
All right, that's what several other people have already said. Yeah.
So here's the thing. There's a modern people are very cynical about the medieval church and about maybe churches in general, and with good reason, right? Religious institutions across history have committed a wide array of sins. No pun intended. And that's because humans are human. Humans will human, right? But in the Middle Ages, probably the closest thing you had to that was your confessor, whether that was a friar or a priest. And there wasn't this idea that these were malicious men looking to do people harm is nonsense. As always, the bad actors are the ones, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So the bad actors are the ones who get mentioned all the time, but history doesn't really spend much time recording all of the good people, all of the nice ways in which people interacted, all of the good things people did for each other, the good that the church did for the communities, right? So your priest was probably the closest thing you had to that, and it would not have been an awful, shameful experience. That just when records of, say, confession survive, when we can find hints to that, it seems like it was one human listening to another confess their darkest thoughts and actions, and the purpose of confession was to purge the soul, right? And so the whole point of that would have been to help the person find a way forward. So that is probably the closest that people would have had in the pre-modern era. But mental health was acknowledged as an issue because it actually plays. There's psychiatry is also kind of a thing in the sense of medicine being used to help boost melancholy. Melancholy is the old word for depression, basically, and it was acknowledged that eating certain things might help with depression, and taking certain herbs. Unfortunately, that idea was based on the four humors, which means that the recommended solutions for the herbs for melancholy may or may not have actually helped because it was about balancing the humors. But certainly some of the remedies that I've read for, and if a woman, especially a postpartum woman, is suffering from melancholy, then give her this concoction. Some of those herbs have now been proven to have psychoactives that could, in fact, maybe help with serotonin regulation, for instance, or dopamine regulation.
They also had a lot of little remedies. 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요. 어서 오세요. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Let me just show you how our proto lemon sauce is coming. I'm just adding, what I'm doing is grinding, keeping the grinding motion going and adding liquid bit by bit. Now here's the other thing that hasn't been addressed at all is how much. Quantities, right? So let me read the recipe again from which we're working. This is the whole recipe. The recipe is lemon sauce for chickens or capons. Get one or more chickens, capons, or cockerels that have been cooked a little in water. Take them out of the water and mount them on a spit. Then get peeled, well-ground almonds and temper them with the bouillon of the chicken. Then get lemon juice and mix it all together with good spices and put it in a saucepan to cook a little. Then pour it over the roast with a little fat. Serve it very hot. Now, you may have noticed there are no timings. There's no quantities anywhere in there. So now we're at the stage of I, as the cook, as the redactor, as the reenactor, have to decide how much bouillon should be added to this. So part of my thinking has to be how thick do I want my sauce. So we're going to be cooking it a little, so we should probably add a little bit more liquid than we might like overall. But the other thing we are going to be adding is lemon juice, although again, it doesn't say how much. It doesn't even tell us the juice of so many lemons. That would have been so at least a little helpful. Oh, thank you for that. Appreciate that.
And also from, where's the name? Your Aussie Therian sent 6 years.
My what?
Your Aussie Therian.
Your Aussie Therian sent us, Jules?
Jules as well.
Oh, thank you, your Aussie Therian. Really appreciate that. So we know we're going to be adding lemon. And it actually says, mix it all together with good spices, right? Saucepan and pour it a little. So here's what we know. Here's what I know about lemon juice. When you heat lemon juice, it denatures it, which means it actually loses its tang, which is why a lot of modern recipes call for lemon juice to be added at the very end after it's off heat so that you still retain that lemon flavor. So, it will be interesting to see, this all actually gets cooked together, how much lemon is actually retained at the end of that cooking process. Let me just check our chicken over here in the oven. Oh, we didn't cover the bottles with pretty medieval towels this time.
No, I forgot.
Okay. Here's our little chicken so far. It's actually looking pretty good. I'm in pretty good shape, so I can go forever. People have accused me of being inhuman, actually, especially my dance students. My dance students have particularly accused me of being inhuman. Okay, I'm just going to do.
She's gonna need a full body massage after this.
Nah, I'll be fine.
Big Racer's on now too.
Big Racer, lovely to see you again. Welcome back.
Here's a good question from Alo. Why didn't they give more directions? Like how many lemons? Was it so the cook could cook to their taste?
Yeah, so Ayla, that's a great question. Why are these medieval recipes generally vague? So my theory, one of the theories is that these recipes were intended, first off, in the 15th century, these recipe collections are not aimed at the average housewife, right? They're not aimed at a merchant's, an artisan or peasant household. They're aimed at an upper class household. And so I'm pretty certain that this was a resume. These recipes were a resume. They were a job application, basically. So the cook would dictate these recipes down and create this beautiful compilation, and then the cook would gift it to, say, the Duke of Milan or the Duke of Ferrara, and say, here, if you hire me, I can make you these dishes. You can see I've included enough details so you know what they contain, but not enough details that your own cook could reliably recreate it. That's one of my theories. That is one of my theories. The other theory is that, it could be that many of these recipes were so common that they didn't need to put all those steps, because anyone who would be reading this as a cook would know, how long you should generally cook a sauce, how much lemon juice this thing should have, because they would have had this recipe, they would have had this dish, they would know how it's supposed to taste. I mean, I can actually reliably recreate recipes. If I eat a dish, I have enough of an intimate relationship with food and cooking that I can recreate that dish myself without a recipe. I can figure out from the taste what kind of herbs and spices are in it, how much, whether it's broth, whether it's wine, whether it's brandy, how much of each of those things it would take, because I've cooked my whole life a huge variety of cuisines. So I don't need a detailed recipe to successfully cook something. So I kind of feel like it might be that as well, that cooks just knew what they were doing. They didn't really need all the details.
So if it doesn't tell what kind of herbs and spices, what kind would you use?
Yeah. So that's a very so when we have something that says good spices, what does that mean? So that could actually be an indication for spices that you prefer yourself, or that you have available at the moment, or that suit the taste of your patrons. But that the idea is that it just must be spiced. How do we know what kind of spices they could have had? Well, one of the things you can do is actually read the other recipes and see when they do actually specify spices, what are they? Another way you can tell what kind of spices would have been available is by reading expense accounts. I know, that doesn't sound like the most exciting thing you've ever read, but hear me out. Expense accounts actually make for very interesting reading, because medieval people, and even at lower class households, they kept accounts of their expenditures and their income. And on the expense accounts, they would actually, in a fair amount of detail, label the things that they're purchasing. And so you can actually know what people are actually buying based on the expense accounts. Other ways you can find out, you can read laws that either regulate, tax or ban certain goods. There's actually also archaeology. Sometimes we actually find pots that have survived, jars of foodstuffs that have survived from a variety of historical eras, and they actually test the scrapings on the inside, and they can tell what was stored in that jar. Sometimes we actually also just find jars that still have spices in them. In Asia anyway, there are tombs, ancient tombs, where they find pots filled with the offerings with basically the funeral feast for the deceased, and the foodstuffs just desiccated and are basically still preserved. So I've seen here in Korea 1,500-year-old nuts, 1,500-year-old spices still in the original bowl in which they were placed in the tomb. So that's a very good question, but there are several ways you can figure out what could have been. Did that answer the question? Hopefully.
It's one of the reasons why, Christy said, it's one of the reasons why we think credit and debit was far more common than just coins. Yep.
Yeah. Then this is the thing, that the idea of credit, living on credit, is not a modern one. I'm pretty certain it dates back to the Roman Empire as well. People, Alessandro Strozzi, the letters that we read at yesterday's shit show of a medieval story time, she actually talked about, in her letter to her son, this 15th century Florentine lady who's managing her family because her husband is deceased and left her a widow. she actually talks about her accounting in the letter, where she talks about men owing her, actually, that she has given them goods and that she now has runs a tab for these people. Right. So yeah, absolutely. Twitchy, 100%. You were just as likely to operate on credit in 15th century Italy as on cash. The idea of spending more than you have, not new. Okay, so you can see how nicely that's actually grinding down. So this modern oven is garbage. It goes off. If I turn the heat to a lower heat to bake things, it just goes off. So big advantage of a medieval oven, that would never happen. So a medieval oven worked by basically building a fire inside of it, and they were brick or they were clay ovens. You would build a fire inside of it, heat it up, and then you would scrape the fire out, and the oven would retain its heat for hours and hours and hours. So there was no going out. The heat did not go out, but it also meant that your food, things that were baked in an oven, wasn't smoky. There was no smoke flavor because the fire was scraped out, and it was the bottom was cleaned, at least to a certain extent, as much as it can be when it's 350 to 500 degrees centigrade or Fahrenheit. Okay, there we go. It's not looking nice. Let me grab a spoon and I will show you how this is looking. Doesn't that look nice? Right. So it actually has a really nice flavor. You have the richness of the chicken bouillon, the chicken broth, and combine that with the richness of the crushed almond. This is going to be really tasty. Nope. Okay, so we have tempered it with the bouillon of chickens. Have we tempered it with enough bouillon of chickens? I don't think so. I think we're going to add a little more.
You need the lemon juice.
Yeah, if you could go ahead and get the lemon juice out.
I just can't the corn.
Now, the question is going to be, how much lemon juice should we add? Now, I love... Oh my God. Yeah, that's it.
Wow, it's separated out.
Yeah, it does. This is the lemon juice of a lot of lemons. So the question is going to be, how much lemon juice should we add? I love sour things personally, and I love the fresh flavor of lemon. On the other hand, I also don't want to make it so sour that it's agony to eat it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add lemon juice gradually, tasting as we go, to come to a good balance of lemon flavor. And good spices. We'll have to ground the spices. Yeah, so the spices I've decided to use today, because this is what I have, I've decided to use some coriander seed, which they did have in medieval Italy, some cloves, also a very common spice in upper class kitchens, cinnamon, and this is Cinnamonum verum, which is not cassia. Cassia is fake cinnamon and is cheap cinnamon and isn't the same. You can tell that this is true cinnamon because it has all those little fine leaf-like layers there. And so this is actually bark from the cinnamon tree. And then a little bit of dried and powdered galangal. So those were all spices that would have been available in the medieval world. I actually need to renew my medieval spice cabinet. I need to get some more grains of paradise. I need to get more cinnamon flowers. I need to get cubebs. I need some long pepper. Well, I'll probably add some black pepper too, because that's definitely a very important spice in medieval kitchens. Long pepper and black pepper. Long pepper is like a long cone that looks like a bunch of peppercorns just grew into a cone, but it's got a more sophisticated flavor profile than black pepper does, I would say. So, and the question was, so is it vague because it allows the cook some room, to interpret? Absolutely. 100%. I think it's the medieval equivalent of salt to taste. And also, but also with these really powerful pungent spices, the person for whom you're cooking, your patron, may or may not like, you know, the same spices that everyone else likes. And you might know that. You might know that they don't like cubebs or grains of paradise, so you leave that out. Right. So absolutely, that vagueness could be on purpose because it is supposed to be to taste, but also the vagueness could be because the cook wants to keep their trade secrets a secret.
Could you use lime juice?
I have not seen limes in medieval European recipes. I know they are in Old World. Limes are Old World. We introduced limes to the Americas actually as part of the Columbian Exchange, but I just have not seen limes in European recipes. So could you? I mean, you could. Would it be authentic? Probably not.
Yes. Coriander.
Coriander, yeah. So we've got
Sarah, February.
We've got coriander seeds, we have cloves, we have cinnamon, and then we've got, the galangal is already powdered. Galangal is a rhizome that is similar to ginger, but I would say it's a more sophisticated ginger. Ginger is very pungent, and ginger smacks you in the face, which is perfectly fine. I love ginger, not a complaint. Just an observation of its effect. Galangal kind of gently taps you on the cheeks. Right. It has a more sophisticated set of flavors, I would say. Also, we're out of powdered ginger. We still have powdered galangal. So what a medieval situation in which we find ourselves. Okay, so here is, doesn't that look nice? That nice almond milk, almond sauce. And like I said, I'm taking this at face value that we should not strain it, because every other recipe that calls for almond milk as almond milk says to strain the almonds out, and this one does not. And so that's why I really think this is a Persian recipe actually that made its way to Florence over time.
Sarah February is on. Hi, Rachel.
Sarah, lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Friend in my head.
Sarah, it's lovely to see you. Okay. Just giving it a taste. Mm-hmm. The chicken flavor is present, but it isn't like overwhelming. It's lovely. It's, you know, it gives it a good meaty richness, but it isn't chicken. Okay, so I think I'm going to call this good. This is tempered, and it will thicken as it cooks. That is all well. Mix it all together with good spices, then put it in a saucepan. So it seems like we should actually be mixing this all in our mortar and then putting it in the saucepan. So I'm going to abide by that, which means we're going to switch to the little mortar. Where's the little mortar?
I put it out for you.
Did you? The little mortar? How am I not seeing it?
In that case, it's down in the. Oh no, I put it back because you said you wanted the.
Yeah, but then it's okay. We should probably always just leave it out.
Fine.
And I'm using this one because this one's occupied at the moment. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and grind my spices. And for those who have not worked with a mortar and pestle before, when anything you put into a mortar, if you can pre-chop it, pre-crush it, break it apart, it makes the process go much, much faster than if you just put a whole chunk of cinnamon stick into your mortar. Break it up first, then put it in.
Okay.
Yes.
So a couple of things. Is that a garnet?
No, this is not. This is a glass stone. It should be a ruby. The original was a ruby and a sapphire. And in the 15th century, this is a replica of a gem owned and worn by Beatrice d'Este, who became the Duchess of Milan when she married Ludovico il Moro. You can see this jewel in her portraits. There's several portraits in which she is wearing this. This is a replica by Armor and Castings, and you can purchase it. It's currently $80, which is a really good deal for this gorgeous piece of replica medieval jewelry. Yeah. And if you want a custom piece and you want real gems, they will absolutely do that for you. But gems, it's funny, in the Middle Ages, gems had a talismanic and pharmaceutical property, or had talismanic and pharmaceutical properties. So we actually have, not many gems have survived that are in their medieval settings, but there are a few that have, where the back, the metal is not, there is no metal backing. There's a metal frame, but the back has been left open so that the gem can be against the wearer's skin and better confer its talismanic and pharmaceutical properties to the wearer. Unfortunately, one of the beliefs about the pharmaceutical properties of gems was that it was good to wear it. It was even better if you ground it up and took it internally. And so when Lorenzo de' Medici, for instance, his health was failing, he was in his 40s and his health was failing. And he was basically the de facto Prince of Florence at that point. And so lots of money, super powerful, super rich. And so he was having pearls and rubies ground up, and I think some diamonds as well, but don't quote me on the diamonds, for certain pearls, for certain rubies. And he was having them ground up and was taking them with liquid, basically. It didn't save him, in case you're wondering. He died in 1494 at age 49. He was very young. Some of you are probably wondering, maybe the gems hurried him along. Yeah, maybe. But he, I think I ran the calculations. He consumed something like $30,000 worth of gems, medicinally, gems and precious stones. And so this kind of thing, if you're interested in a source for that, there's a book called Lorenzo at Home. It is a translation of a large section of the death inventory that was taken of his palazzo after he passed on. His entire palazzo was inventoried so that they could assess the value of the items, and of course then his family could pay the appropriate taxes based on the value of those items. And so the original of the death inventory hasn't survived, but a copy from 1517 has. And so this Lorenzo de' Medici at Home actually has a translation of the items, many of the items that were found in his home. And there are also expense accounts from the Medici household that are in the state archives in Florence. And you can actually go and look at them, the original ones, if you want. You can actually make an appointment to go to the archives in Florence. There are multiple archives, and actually examine these documents in person. But if you're lucky, then sometimes there are digitized transcriptions of things like expense accounts. What is that? Internetarchive.org is a fantastic online resource, by the way, for a host of primary medieval sources, transcriptions of primary medieval sources, and sometimes actually the facsimiles of manuscripts. Okay, you can see that's coming along, and let me tell you, it smells really nice. The fresh, bright citrus notes of the coriander, it's one of the reasons I picked it, because I knew it would complement the lemon. The sweet cinnamon, the pungent bite of the clove. Yeah, and the galangal isn't in there yet. I'll just go ahead and add that in so that it can get mixed appropriately. Chicken is done, I think. Let me check the chicken. Now, if you are a user and lover of meat thermometers, chicken should register at about 165 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like 90 degrees centigrade. I'm actually not as familiar with the metric meat temperatures, because I learned the meat temperatures when I was still in my teen years living in America. But it should be 165 degrees Fahrenheit for food safety purposes for chicken. That being said, I have had raw chicken meat in Japan. Chicken sashimi, basically. It was not good. It was not something I would ever try. I mean, I'm pretty gung ho about trying any food stuff once. That is not one I think I ever need, to which I ever need ever give another chance. Nope, not tasty. The texture was rubbery and the flavor was. I mean, it wasn't foul. It was just no. But I think it was mostly the texture, honestly. Yeah. I wish I could share the smells with you, all these lovely smells. Okay. Yeah, so you can definitely imagine that medieval cooks were in good shape. 100%. Yeah. Okay, here is our spice blend. So we are now at the point where temper it with bouillon of chickens, get lemon juice, and mix it all together with good spices. So here's a little trick, everyone. When you grind spices in a mortar like this, and you want to make certain that you get all of the spice flavor out of your mortar, if you have a liquid like we're about to have, what you can do is empty your spices into the vessel into which they should go, and then add the liquid, in this case lemon juice, into your mortar, swish it around, and then put the lemon juice into the sauce. And the lemon juice will pick up any last bits of yummy spice flavor, any last bits of spice dust, and the oils that have built up inside the mortar from grinding. This is actually a trick the Ménagier de Paris, written in 1391, the Goodman of Paris, actually advises in his section on cookery that if you are grinding spices and you're also grinding breadcrumbs for your dish, that you should grind your spices first, then grind your breadcrumbs in the mortar, and the breadcrumbs will pick up any last bits of the spices so that not a single thing is wasted. Yes, Hanson?
Oh no, I banned somebody and said he's an absolute loser, but he needs to drink. Ravenna said they liked your pun, chicken fowl fowl.
Yeah. Okay, so everyone, I have an insidious brain that makes puns without me trying to. 99% of the time, any pun that falls out of my mouth is going to be my brain sabotaging me. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. So now the question is, do I want to use all of these spices? I don't know. So what I'm going to do, I've got this nice ground spice mixture. I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to put some of this in here. I'm going to put about a teaspoon in, because about a teaspoon of spice will definitely be good. But I'm going to add a little more as it cooks along after I get a taste for it. And then my lemon juice. Shaking with the lemon juice, since the sediment separated out. Okay, now how much lemon juice?
Disco Cat says, eating my peasant noodles while watching succulent spices and food.
Nice. Disco Pat, awesome. Love it. Okay, so now I've put the lemon juice into the mortar, and I'm just going to use the pestle to swirl it around to pick up any of those oils and the last bit of dust from the grinding. Noodles. So some of you have asked me about noodles. You know, there's a myth, some of you may or may not have heard this myth, and it's an incorrect one, that Marco Polo is the one who brought noodles back from the East and introduced them to Italy. He did not. That did not happen. Italy has been making noodles and pasta for long before Marco Polo left and or returned. So no, that is a myth. It seems that humans have always found a way to take grains, grind them up with water, add water, make a paste, roll it out, cook it somehow, right? That's yeah. Okay, let us bring the comically large mortar back into view, and let's give it a taste. It's lemony, it's got a bite. Spices are almost not to be tasted, so I'm just going to add the rest in. What the hell? YOLO. Yoko, you only cook once? No, that's not true. Okay. Good evening to those just joining. Welcome to my medieval cooking party. We are preparing a 15th century Italian dish from Naples, lemon chicken. And one of the big interesting differences between this lemon chicken recipe and any modern one I've ever seen, especially from Europe, is that it actually uses not just almond milk, but ground almonds in the sauce. So very different. And also that unlike in most modern sauces in Europe and in American cuisine, there are actually sweet spices like cinnamon, like coriander, like cloves. Okay, I can taste the cloves. The cinnamon is not so prominent. It doesn't really. I'm thinking actually I might want more cinnamon. You know,
somebody just asked, won't the cinnamon overpower the dish?
No, no, it will not. So here's the difference. This is Ceylon cinnamon, Cinnamon verum, not cassia. Cassia actually has that red hot cinnamon flavor, which is not true cinnamon. Cinnamon verum has a more delicate cinnamon flavor. So I'm actually seriously thinking about grinding another cinnamon stick, because I'm not picking up any of the cinnamon at all. I'm mostly just getting the lemon. I might add some more lemon, actually. Maybe a little more of the bouillon, since we'll be cooking this down. Could you fetch me another cinnamon stick, please?
I can.
Yeah, I think I will be adding some more cinnamon to this. Yep, that is a good question. The chicken is done, so I'm going to pull it off of the roasting spit. Again, for those just joining, medieval kitchens, they did not bake, they did not roast meat in ovens for the most part. In Europe anyway, they cooked it on a spit. They did roast meat in ovens in Persia, though, in the 15th and 16th century at least, and I'm certain way before that. They actually had basically tandoor ovens and these giant clay ovens, and they would actually suspend roasts from the top of the oven over the coals, and they would roast them that way. So instead of spit roasting them, they would just hang them over the coals inside the clay oven, and they would bake that way. But Europeans didn't have that cooking method as far as I can tell, interestingly. Yep. Okay, good. Questions or comments?
So many.
So many.
I'm going to delete this one. Everyone's worried about the amount of cinnamon.
Yeah,
a lot of cinnamon.
Yeah, I know it seems like it's a lot of cinnamon, but it really doesn't, because cinnamon verum is much more mild than cassia is. Yeah, in case you didn't know, you can just eat it.
The flavors will become more strong once you cook it.
It will become a little more strong, but not that much more strong. I'm actually more worried about the cloves. But here's the other thing. We have to remember that medieval food was spicy. So spices were a form of conspicuous consumption, 100%. They were also a way, they from ancient Rome at least going forward, Europeans have loved spicy food. And it's actually Louis XIV who breaks that, who basically breaks food in Western Europe, because he comes along and he decides that he does not like spicy food in the sense of cinnamon and cloves and galangal and all these spices, nutmeg, that literally drove Europe's economy for hundreds of years. He decides he doesn't like that. He thinks it interferes with the pure flavors of the food. That's where Nouvelle Cuisine comes from Louis XIV's court. And so his cooks start making basically plain French food. What we now associate as French food is mostly like that's Louis XIV's court. And what happened in the 17th century, what happened as it went in Versailles, so went it in other courts. And so basically, that is really when food starts getting boring in Europe, relatively speaking, where we stop using spices, where we just sort of rely on, herbs and garlic and pepper and salt and the natural broths of meat dishes. That's when it all starts. That's when it changes. But before that, medieval food food across Europe, Eastern or Western, is full of these really interesting flavors: sweet and savory, sour, all together, spices. The line between a sweet and a savory dish completely blurred. Yes.
Papa George, $23.97, sent 10 memberships.
Oh, Papa George, appreciate that. Thank you. Gift memberships for people to see what kind of perks they have. So if you want to become a patron on Patreon or a channel member, I have those come with all kinds of extra perks: access to extra content, extra videos, extra tutorials, access to ad-free videos. Also, access to my Creative Contessa Discord server, which is where we share a lot of really good information. We talk about ideas about how to recreate medieval items. We share our expertise in various fields. We bounce ideas off of each other. And sometimes we just act like support animals for each other, support humans. So appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so our chicken, I pulled the chicken out of the oven and I'm letting it rest. For those who are maybe more beginners on the cooking front, if you cook a piece of meat, no matter how you cook it, let it cool down for 10 to 15, let it rest for 10 to 15 minutes before you cut into it. If you cut into it when it is still freshly hot, all of the liquid on the inside is still excited from the heat. And if you make an incision into the meat, all the liquid is going to basically boil out. And so your meat will actually be dry. So you want to let the meat rest so that the liquids have a chance to basically calm down and redistribute throughout the meat, so that when you cut into it finally, all the liquid doesn't just flow out like from a gash from a wound. So I've got the chicken is over here to my right, resting under cover. And also you want to cover it so that it doesn't dry out as part of the cooling down process. Oh, thank you so much for that super chat. Really appreciate that. Johannes, I think it says. Johannes.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for asking the great questions.
Are you impeccable with the wrist? What are you using under the mortar to hold it in place?
Oh, these are felted pads from Mongolia that we bought in Mongolia 2.5 years ago at the airport, actually. And I'm using this. It would stay in place without these. I'm using it though to try to pad the sound so that my downstairs neighbors don't hate me, because I'm in Daegu, South Korea, and it's like 9:30.
9:46.
Yeah. So I don't want my neighbors to hate me by, making loud hammering noises that transmit throughout the whole building. Okay. Just going to add this in. Bring the comically large mortar back to the screen. Okay. So we have now added, we have ground our almonds. We have tempered it with the bouillon, the cooking juice from when we blanched or parboiled the chicken. We've added the lemon juice. We've mixed it all together with good spices. And now we're going to put it in a pan, in a pot, and we're going to cook it together a little while. So I will bring the cooking pot over here. This was the pot. This is a modern clay pot. It's a Korean clay pot, but it simulates pretty accurately how a medieval clay pot would have cooked. And we actually have depictions of cooking pots from Italy from the 15th century. The walls actually come a little bit more out. It's a little more pot-bellied, but very, very similar. So it's the closest I can get. My replica medieval cooking items are in storage in Mississippi. So we're currently sort of long-term tourists here in Daegu, South Korea. So, okay, now we're going to go ahead and transfer this to the pot where we will cook it to thicken it. No, they did not have rubber scrapers in medieval European kitchens, although they could have had, hypothetically, they maybe could have had something like a rubber scraper in South Asia where rubber trees come from. So probably the finger was the rubber scraper of choice. Oh, I do not like this feeling at all. Ugh.
It's too bad you don't have somebody else here.
Yeah. I need a professional bowl scraper. That's your whole job in the kitchen, just to scrape things out. This part is absolutely a real workout. And so, as far as I can tell, although we have some evidence of stone mortars in medieval kitchens, and I am going to cheat and use a rubber scraper for this because this particular thing is way too heavy to fight with. It seems that possibly, yeah. It seems that mortars would have been made of wood or bronze. So the bronze would actually be lighter than this granite is. And the wood would certainly be lighter and much more manageable. But this is what we could, in terms of large mortars, this is what we were able to get. Can any of you hear that tiny little meow?
I stood up. The cat wants my attention now.
Yeah. Ryan stood up, so now the cat wants him to play with her. Okay.
You done with this?
Yes. Okay, I'm now going to put this on the stove. We're going to let it...
She wants to play with the mortar.
She wants to play with the mortar. The cat wants to play with the mortar. Okay.
I don't know what you did with your laser pointer, kitty.
What she did with it? You mean what I did with it?
Yeah, what you did.
Yeah, well...
What did you do with the laser pointer?
I don't know. I put it somewhere. Okay, so we have the pot is on the stove. I am going to put a lid on it. So in the medieval kitchen, they had pots. They had pots with lids, but they also improvised lids as necessary. Oh, little baby! Oh my gosh!
Okay,
Oh.
well, find your...
That's Navi. She wants to play with the laser pointer. I don't know if you could hear that pathetic, tiny little meow.
I don't know what your mama did.
Tips for using stoneware on the stove. Seems scary. So these stoneware, these clay pots, these modern Korean clay pots have been tempered so that it's not a problem. You can put them on fire, even if you don't have to slowly heat it up or anything like that. God knows they do not slowly heat them up in kitchens here. But I do recommend that if you take it off of the stove, that you put it on a temperature neutral surface like felted wool or,
Are you done already? Oh.
any kind of trivet like this, because you don't want to shock it. And I would definitely not recommend, say, heating your clay pot up and pouring a cold liquid into it if you dry heat it, right? Don't do that. Yeah, so you do want to be mindful of thermal shock. And if you're using replica medieval pots, thermal shock is absolutely a thing. So with replica medieval pots, they often talk about easing it. Even in some medieval sources, they allude to the fact that you should probably ease it close to the fire. Just put all the rest of the bouillon in. You should ease it towards the fire to bring it up to temperature. But the more important part really is that when you remove it from the fire, you don't put it on a cold surface. That's how I shattered my first medieval clay pot, and my first ever anything prepared in as authentic a medieval manner as I could. Hand ground almonds, everything washed, medieval colander, water hauled from the creek, the whole 9 yards. It was a frumenti. It was perfectly cooked. Each grain of the barley was just the right al dente texture. The almond milk had sauced it up nicely. I pulled it off of the fire. It was an event in Sweden. Set it on the cold ground in May in Sweden. And I heard the most heart-wrenching thing I've ever heard, the crack. Crack, 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 poof! And it literally shattered apart. There was like a 3-foot explosion radius. I was heartbroken over the loss of the pot, but it was also the 4 hours of work that were now on the ground and irretrievable, really. I think I do recall actually picking up some of the shards and sadly, woefully taking a spoon and scraping off bits of the frumenti. Yeah, so you do want to be careful about thermal shock, but it's mostly taking it off of the fire and putting it on a cold surface where it really matters. And it depends on the pot, right? Like if it's a replica medieval pot, it's not going to have the same kind of tempering as these modern stone clay pots that you can buy, say, in a Korean grocery store. Yep. All right, pecan, yeah. Yeah, the sound was, it was horrifying. It was, oh my God. Oh, but I learned, and I never made that mistake ever again. So failure is a great teacher. I really do thoroughly believe that.
Well, Sarah February asked, where can I get a clay pot like yours?
So
tag one in the thing.
Oh, we will. I think we have some clay pots. We will tag some clay pots in the shopping products. To get one exactly like mine, this is a Korean pot, so I don't.
Come to Korea.
Come to Korea. But I'm confident. We'll see. We'll tag them under the little shopping tab. Trinity Potteries. If you are in Europe, Trinity Court Pottery makes really excellent replica medieval cooking pots. Those were my first ones. That one that shattered oh so horrifyingly was a Trinity Court pot.
How long do you simmer it for?
How long do we simmer it for? So the instructions say, put it in a saucepan to cook a little, then pour it over the roast. So, okay, so we have to think about what a little is in a medieval slow food world, right? So this is where you try to put yourself in the mindset of a person cooking in the 15th century. Nothing happens quickly. Very little happens quickly in the 15th century. Oh, drink, everyone. Was it what was the comment?
No, I banned somebody.
Oh, someone got banned. Okay. In the 15th century, everything took time. Getting dressed took time. Doing your hair took time. Bathing took time. Washing took time. Making anything took time. Life actually existed at a much slower pace. People in the 15th century were probably in certain ways much less stressed and anxious than we are now. They had different stressors, but the anxiety of time, not so much. So when a recipe like this says a little, meaning a short amount of time, we have to take a shot, everyone. We have to think of it in terms of a little time in the 15th century. So I'm going to say that is not just until it comes to a simmer, because we want these flavors to meld. So I'm going to say it should go probably at least for 15 minutes, honestly. Good. Yay, Twitchy. Good for you, my dear. Love you. I missed having you in my live chats.
Yeah, it said till it thickens then?
Yeah, so here's an interesting thing. The recipe right before this one is chickens. This is the weird part. So it's almost like we have two very similar recipes back to back. So here's the recipe right before this one. Entitled Chickens or Capons on a Spit with Their Sauce. When you have roasted the chickens well, take 5 peeled almonds. Now here we get specific. Like, what the hell, man? Anyway.
5 peeled almonds.
Take 5 peeled almonds and grind them up with fine sugar. If you do not have sugar, use honey. Just 5. Use honey. And temper that with lemon juice to make it slightly thick. Put this over the chicken, or else put the sauce in small bowls and the chicken on plates. Serve warm.
Sorry, fans, the cat ran in.
So, there we have a little bit more specificity about things like texture. Make it thick. Also, only 5 almonds. and temper it with fine sugar. Again, no quantity on the sugar. But what's interesting about that recipe before is it says if you don't have sugar, then use honey. The assumption being that it's more likely that you're going to have honey in your kitchen than sugar, because even still in the 15th century, sugar is still a luxury item. Honey is also an upper end item, but it's more likely you're going to have that than an imported sugar. So yeah, so we have to decide, cook it until what point? I'm going to say until it's thick, because I like my sauces thick. I'm a thick sauce girl. I'm a saucy sauce girl.
Jonas is actually trying to write down the whole recipe too, and keeping track of what you're doing. Twitchy says, I'm the stern abbess to the condotieros for giving moderation in chat. Which is crazy, because I'm not that forgiving.
Yeah, yeah, Twitchy, it's really funny. The condotiero is not really terribly forgiving. In fact, he bans people I don't think need to be banned, but he bans them for different reasons than I might also.
I've never seen a medieval peasant. Why is she dressed up as a medieval European peasant? And then Twitchy said, never seen a medieval peasant in silk.
Yeah, so I'm definitely not. Okay, so why is it, here's a good question. Why is it you think I'm a peasant? Yeah, this is definitely not peasant attire. Just like I'm not Mennonite, I'm not Amish, I'm not a pilgrim. Lots of this. Yeah, so kerchiefs, here's the thing. Noble women wore kerchiefs, especially when they were at home, especially if they were just, casual, right? So there are lots of portraits of patrician women, because they technically weren't aristocrats in 15th century Florence anymore, of patrician ladies dressed almost exactly as I am, in fact, with just their cotte, no overlayers, and a kerchief of some kind, a combination of veiling and coifing, like this, right? And that's because in Florence, women, even the patrician women, were at their core supposed to, and the men too, were supposed to emulate modesty, Republican in the idea of Florence being a republic, not modern political parties, right? Yeah. So they were supposed to not be like those fancy royals in other polities in Italy. They weren't supposed to be like the dukes. They weren't supposed to be like the marquises. They weren't supposed to be like princes and princesses, right? So that is conveyed by wearing modest head coverings, for instance, like a kerchief. Except that when it was party time, like when there was a ball or a public festival, then the women and the men are supposed to put on their finest, fanciest threads, basically, and have their hair done in the fanciest manner. But no, definitely not a peasant. Peasants don't wear silk. And peasants also don't wear jewels. Yes.
But good question.
No, it's a good question. No, it's a good question. No offense was taken. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, I'm just saying that because I don't want them to.
Yeah, no offense was taken by you thinking this is like a peasant. But yeah, peasants would not have worn dresses made out of striped silk like this. Basically, this would be a silk brocade, right? So no.
Remember who the tapestry is from?
Yes.
It's real.
This is not This is not an AI green screen background, everyone. This, however, it's a replica of an original late 15th century tapestry. It belonged to an Englishman. You can kind of tell that because of the order of the garter insignia here. But this is a silk screen. This is a cheater. This is one we can easily pack up and take with us wherever to create instant medieval background. This is a silk screen one. However, I have a massive collection of replica true tapestries that are actually woven. No, I think we're up into the 80s at this point because we bought more while we were here.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. She says only with a slight sense of shame. Okay, the sauce is now.
Do you dress like this every day?
I do end up dressing like this every day because I live stream almost every day. And when I do my medieval living history live streams, I dress in historical clothing.
And her husband thinks it's hot.
Yeah, and the condottiero thinks it's sexy. But honestly, would I dress this way all the time if I weren't live streaming? Probably not. But the reality is I'm kind of lazy. Once I'm dressed, I'm dressed. I don't want to change clothes multiple times a day. So any day where I have a live stream on this channel, I just dress like this. I don't bother. Why play around?
We went for a walk around Korea like that.
Yeah, yes, so I do. I go out all the time dressed like this here in I'm in Daegu, Korea, South Korea, just to make that clear. Oh, yeah, and everyone always loves it. Like everyone loves it, from the smallest children to the eldest senior citizens. They love it. All kinds of compliments.
Okay, now here Ursula Bear has a great comment.
Yes.
So no hand-me-downs of silk outside the family. I mean, they do give away clothing, so it seems reasonable that silks may be handed down to quote-unquote peasants.
No.
Not that peasants necessarily means what we think of
Oh,
as peasants.
yeah. No. So would silk have been handed down to members on the, people on the lower end of the spectrum? Probably not. So we have bequests. So in wills, we have plenty of evidence of bequests, of items being bequeathed to servants, for instance. Fine bedding, expensive clothing. Expensive clothing does get bequeathed to people on the lower rungs of society. But here's what I'm pretty certain happened to that. I'm pretty certain that the servants who received those garments didn't wear them. I'm pretty certain they sold them.
Probably.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain they sold them and got money for them. Because here's the reality of life for people on that end of the spectrum. They're workers, they're working. They're handling tasks that are frequently dirty and messy. And so they're not going to be able to wear that silk garment very often. It wouldn't be very useful to them. Whereas having the cash from selling it would allow them to buy fabric that they could wear, use to make clothing or have clothing made that they can use on a daily basis. Also, there are sumptuary laws that sometimes prevent people in certain socioeconomic brackets from actually wearing things like silk. So, yeah, I think it's unlikely that servants were absolutely bequeathed fine garments on a regular basis, including fur-lined ones. But I'm pretty certain they ended up selling them for money, and then those garments end up,
The cats are being weird.
Yeah, they are. Oh, and also garments can be picked apart and are often refashioned into other garments. And now in a household, depending on the rank of the servant and their function and whether it's a royal household, servants who didn't engage in dirty work. So I'm not talking about scullery maids, but say servants who attended the prince or the princess in capital P. They received what's called livery, which was clothing once a year as part of their payment. And that clothing could have been made of silk, especially if the prince or princess, capital P, wanted to exude power through clothing, because clothing was a way to communicate with people in the Middle Ages, as it is today, in fact. And so they would often dress their servants in very expensive clothing made of very expensive fabrics. But those aren't the kind of servants who are cleaning. They're not in the scullery. They're not cooking. They're not washing dishes. They're not in the fields, right? So being a servant in the Middle Ages didn't perforce mean that you were on the bottom of society or you were even lower class. It just meant you were lower on the rung than the person whom you served, which means that kings were served by dukes, dukes were served by counts were served by barons, etc., etc., etc.
I would just ask, can you add vegetables to this dish?
Can you add vegetables to the dish? You could. Would a medieval person? No. This is upper level cuisine. This is absolutely cuisine that would have been consumed by the wealthy, by aristocrats, by wealthy merchants. And at that level of society, they don't eat much in the way of pottages. A pottage is basically a stew. Pottages that's a stew that would have like vegetables and meat mixed in together. What is happening?
He's like licking the chest.
I don't know why he's doing that. Our cat is licking a piece of furniture for some random reason, and it's a little concerning to us. Anyway, what was I talking about before you interrupted me with Jimmy? Vegetables, right. Vegetables were generally served separately. And the reality is, this is one of those weird conundra about medieval society versus modern society. In the medieval world, the bottom 80% of society, the peasants, the artisans, the laborers, they probably ate a more nutritionally dense diet than the wealthy and the powerful, because the wealthy and the powerful were eating a lot of meat. They were eating refined wheat flour. They could afford sugar in not necessarily the quantities we can today, but in quantities that were not necessarily good for their health. And so they were not eating a vegetable-rich diet. They were not eating pottages made of lots of root vegetables and pulses and vetches, right? So their diet, handsome.
Jesus, I tried to slit my wrist.
So their diet, the diets of the wealthy were actually pretty imbalanced and relatively nutrient poor, whereas the bottom 80%, they were eating whole grain bread. They were eating lots of root vegetables. They were eating pulses. They were eating whatever kind of fresh herbs were in season or dried herbs they could get their hands on, which were a lot. So their diets were actually more nutritionally dense. They actually had better nutrition. That's why the wealthy were getting gout and peasants were not. So at this level of cuisine, they do not seem to have really often mixed vegetables into any of their dishes. We have a few recipes for a few vegetable dishes that have survived. They're usually included under Lenten food because that's what you would eat when it was a fasting period, basically. But for instance, let's see, where do the Lenten dishes start in this recipe? Lenten dishes, right? Chickpea broth, peas, broad beans. There's 3 recipes for fake cheese products. One is for fake junket cheese, fake ricotta, and fake butter, all made with almond milk. Here's a recipe for parsnips. Here is a rice dish. There's different fritters, one made with herbs, one made with elderflowers. Right. So, they would eat vegetables like that when it was a fasting time, and they could be served as a side dish, but they don't seem to have mixed them in together. In fact, dishes at this level of cuisine were very often plated up separately and served separately with beautiful presentation.
She said, how to show food is poor? Catalog it as Lenten.
Right, yeah, how to show food is poor, catalog it as Lenten, exactly.
And would this chicken dish be served on a quote-unquote trencher to soak up the sauce? And I'm guessing they mean by a
bread trencher. Yeah. Italy, that's a good question. Trenchers, for those who are wondering.
It's not gout, it's just my gate.
It's just my gate. For those who are wondering, a trencher could be made of metal, it could be made of wood, it could be made of bread. So we're talking here about a bread trencher. Could this have been served on a bread trencher? It would not have been served on a bread trencher. It would have been served on a beautiful serving dish as part of the presentation. And it would have been pre-carved, because that was the idea. Part of one of the 15th century books of etiquette that discuss in detail how food should be served talk about, if you present it in its whole form, and then you take it to the carvery, the sideboard, you carve it, and then you serve it back at table. The pieces should be carved, basically bite-sized. So it would not be served on a bread trencher. Would it be eaten on a bread trencher? Maybe. And this is a period where we know they were still eating on bread trenchers because, again, in these books of etiquette that talk about service, part of the preparation for a feast or a banquet is actually preparing the bread trenchers. And they actually provide instructions on how to carve 4-day-old bread to make bread trenchers. So the bread trencher would have been the thing on which you ate your food, not the thing on which the food was served. But the bread trenchers were often not put straight on the tablecloth. Bread trenchers were actually put on a metal or a wooden trencher that would then make certain, where is it?
Up there.
I am in the right, yes I am. I actually have a replica metal trencher. This is a replica 15th century metal trencher, right? And you probably wouldn't serve the food directly on this. You would actually carve out a piece of bread that would fit here. The bread would fit on top of the trencher, and then you would eat the food on top of the bread trencher. Would you then eat the bread? No, it was not fresh bread. It was 4-day-old stale bread. That bread, though, that had absorbed all the sauces, that would actually get given to the poor of the community. And so very often after a meal, especially a large meal, a banquet-like meal, the poor of the community would often, depending on the community, line up outside the kitchen door where they knew that the trenchers would be handed out after the meal, right? So again, circular economy, nothing was thrown away. That's a good question, though. Thank you. Really great question. Did that answer the question? And let me show you an example of an Italian serving platter. Bring me any of the bowls the beautiful, handsome, beautiful Maiolica dish, please.
Oh, one of these guys.
Yes. We actually have a replica serving bowl here from 15th century Italy, so I can show you. This is a replica of a serving bowl from 15th century Italy, right? So the chicken would be put in here and it would be presented, so, presentation, beautiful. Then it would be taken and carved and then brought back to the table. So just so everyone knows, bowls like these, they were not for eating. They were for serving. It's a reenactorism. There's a lot of reenactors out there who buy these plates, these dishes and bowls and plates, and then they use them for eating, but they weren't meant for eating. These were serving dishes. Yeah. So what are we thanking people for? What just happened?
Jonas gave you a super chat.
Oh, Jonas. Ionis.
Again,
Ionis, thank you again. That's really wonderful, really generous of you. I'd like to thank all of you who've been just so generous today with the super chats and the gems and, my channel members and my patrons really coming out today. This was made by White Hart Pottery in the United States. So if you're in the US, White Hart Pottery, we have 2 of their pieces and we love them so much.
That's not even my favorite one.
Yeah, it's really pretty. Okay, let me just give this
I haven't got this kind of money.
how much was this? This was not expensive.
Like 50?
Yeah, so this beautiful hand-painted, hand-tossed plate. White Hart, H-A-R-T, White Hart Pottery. It was $50, not expensive in the least. Yep. So yeah, I think we look at a beautiful piece like that and we assume that it's going to be super expensive. Of course, I should say that's me making assumptions, and I apologize for that. I understand that for many people, $50 for a serving bowl is probably a lot of money. So I apologize for that assumption just out the gate. But for those of us who are sort of in the middle income bracket from Europe or the United States, I don't think that $50 is that much for this particular piece. In fact, if I'd been the person doing the shopping, I might have insisted on paying more. Because I appreciate handmade items. I appreciate the time it takes to achieve mastery, to be able to make this item, the skill it takes to do all of this beautiful detail work. And I feel like artisans should get paid a really good wage for their creative efforts. Unfortunately, they're often fighting with terrible modern ideas about how much something should cost because of cheap mass-produced items, right? Yeah, rant off. Okay.
Little House on the Prairie.
Oh, Little House on the Prairie. Yeah, no. Nope, definitely not a prairie woman, a prairie dweller. A prairie, what were they called? The homesteaders. Definitely not a homesteader in the 19th century meaning of that term. So our, goodness gracious, what did you do? Sorry. Okay, let me show you what this, without burning myself, let me show you what this sauce looks like. Tennessee Blacksmith, appreciate that. Okay, so this is the sauce so far. Let's give it a taste. Well,
the mixture thickened.
The mixture has thickened. Yep.
She says 50 is an excellent price.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%.
I was super happy to pick it up.
So we were all concerned about the cinnamon being overpowering. Honestly, it's not present in any detectable way, which could mean I didn't put enough spices in. Unfortunately, I haven't been back to the 15th century, so I haven't eaten this dish. So this is one of the challenges of recreating medieval recipes, is that none of us are from this era originally, and so none of us have actually had the original dish, so we really can't know how it's supposed to taste. How strong should the spices be? We don't know, because there's no quantity given there. So, maybe I should add more to actually boost the spice profile. It is absolutely lemony. I may have added too much lemon juice, maybe. But also, we have to remember, a sauce itself should be a little strong, stronger than you want the flavor ultimately to be, because it's going to be eaten with the chicken, right? I'm not just going to, although I guess I could, I'm not just going to like spoon it out of the pot straight into my mouth, although I have done that with sauces. But actually the second spoonful, the second taste was actually better than the first. So that could be because the almond actually separated out a little bit from the sauce, the juice. I'm sorry, what, Handsome?
Do you use Ceylon cinnamon or Chinese cassia cinnamon?
Yes, Ceylon cinnamon. And so these recipes, if they call for cinnamon, they mean Ceylon. They mean cinnamomum verum. Because if they want cassia, they will call for cassia. They absolutely had and used cassia in medieval recipes in Europe because they called for it. But they also knew that there was a difference. This recipe, I could have used cassia here actually, because it just says good spices. What's a good spice? What's a good spice to you? But for those, if you know the difference between that there is Ceylon cinnamon versus cassia, was that Susan who asked that?
Nick Gila
I'm liking this more and more the more I eat it. Now that I've mentally adjusted my expectations on the sour part. So Ceylon cinnamon is, when you hear about the health-giving properties of cinnamon, they're referring to Ceylon cinnamon, cinnamomum verum, not cassia cinnamon. What you buy, what you are more likely to get in a grocery store in Germany or France or Italy, or in the United States, I don't know about Canada, is, if it's called cinnamon, it's more likely to be cassia than Ceylon cinnamon. Cassia doesn't really have any of the health-giving properties that cinnamomum verum does. And it, actually, in large quantities, it's not good for you. So there is a difference. And as far as I know, cassia is cheaper than Ceylon cinnamon, because Ceylon cinnamon requires actually a lot of manual labor to produce it. Because Ceylon cinnamon is basically thin strips of cinnamon tree bark that are then manually stacked, layered into each other like a cinnamon lasagna. And I've been to Ceylon. Ceylon is Sri Lanka, and I've actually seen this process at work. And it is very laborious to make these long, manually packed cinnamon sticks, and then they're cut up and sold out. Whereas cassia is just a single cut off of the cassia tree, in essence. Yep.
Where did you get the pendant?
Okay, this pendant is a replica of one owned by Beatrice d'Este. Dates to the 1490s at the latest, but it could have been made before that. And this is a replica by Armour and Castings, Armour with a U. Yes, Handsome?
I gotta call out Christopher Flynn, because they said, what in the 1442 are we watching? And it's the closest I've seen.
Wow, nice. Christopher Flynn, awesome. You're actually in the 1470s, but awesome. Great that you guessed it was 15th century. Welcome to my medieval cooking party. We are currently working on a 15th century Italian lemon chicken recipe. And I have declared that our sauce is thick enough. So I'm going to transfer it over to the viewing area. All right, so that you can all see it. Can we see it, Handsome? Can we see?
Not yet on my screen.
Oh.
Let me check.
Okay.
I'm updating.
Just give it a stir.
Yep.
So when you are cooking in a clay pot, there's a couple of things to remember. Clay retains heat a lot longer than stainless steel or aluminum pots do. a lot longer, which means you can actually turn the heat off and it will keep cooking for a decent while. So just keep that in mind. Also keep it in mind that it will be very hot for a long while, so remember to use hot pads. So look at this. Ah, this is a nice thick sauce. Isn't that beautiful? So it has had no salt added to it yet. I am going to go ahead and add salt to it because I'm a salt lover. And I do believe that medieval cooks, that salt could have been included under good spices, or that just medieval cooks knew that you should salt something to at least give it a bare, a base level of salt. And then the salt could be adjusted by the diners out there at the table. I also want to taste what happens when we add salt to adjust the flavors to see how that makes the flavors stand out. Yeah, this is definitely going to be very, very good with the chicken. Okay, so now it says to pour it over the roast. So I'm actually... Yeah, actually, we can do this. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. We're going to do it right. I'm going to put it in the beautiful plate. We have the plate. The chicken will fit in the plate. Let's do this.
Beautiful clay pot. Is it a donable? I'm not sure what donable means.
Donabi?
Donabi?
Oh, maybe they mean Adobe? Do they mean Adobe?
I don't know. Nick Gill, maybe re-ask your question.
So this is a modern Korean clay pot. We bought it here in Korea. Okay, I'm going to put the chicken roasted chicken in our pan. Okay.
I would dip some tortilla chips in that.
Why not? You know what? So I'm going to tell you, this is very lemony. It definitely has an intense lemon flavor.
Oh, here's a difficult question to answer.
Hold on. Pouring it on. Pouring on the sauce.
Pouring on the sauce. Pouring on the sauce.
It says to pour it over. Okay, well, maybe not so that it flows over. Okay, what's the question?
Is medieval era 15th century?
Yes. In my definition, the 15th century is absolutely still the Middle Ages. So, okay. So here's the thing. Terms like medieval and Renaissance and Dark Ages and Joseon, right? It's, what counts as medieval? So medieval is literally supposed to be, it literally means the Middle Age, the age between two ages. What are those two ages? The ancient world and the modern world. In my mind, the 15th century is absolutely not the modern world. There is nothing modern about it, right? Feudalism is still a going concern in many places. Most of the political institutions and religious institutions that define the medieval world are absolutely still in power. The Reformation hasn't happened yet, right? So for me, the 16th century is the beginning of the modern era. The 15th century is still medieval. And while you can say, well, what about Renaissance? Well, Renaissance is more about art and less about the way people lived their lives, right?
So donabe are a Japanese type of rice pot.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Then,
thank you,
Ursula, thank you. I donabe, it is a thing, donabe. I had never heard that before. We're in Korea, so this is a Korean clay pot. But I'm confident that there are similarities. Okay, look at that. Isn't that pretty?
The really fancy ones have an inner lid to control the steam.
I want to, I'm tipping it so you can see it enough to see the way the beautiful, doesn't that look pretty? Look really nice?
I'm down.
Yeah. Well, it's good you're down because this is your dinner. Okay, so it also says, pour it over the roast with a little fat. And we actually have in the roasting pan here, we actually do have a little bit of the fat left. So I'm going to, okay, I can't lift this up. Okay, I'm going to actually take the fat and just dribble that on. No, the pan was cooled down a while ago, so that's okay. I'm just going to dribble the drippings, basically, the drippings from...
It looks healthy.
It looks healthy.
No, that's a lot of fat.
No, fat is good for you. Fat is healthy. This is healthy fat. Mm. The drippings, when it roasted in the pan, some of the collagen leaked out or rendered out with the fat and then kind of like caramelized on the bottom of the pan. It's pretty tasty. So if this had been spit roasted, if you ever look at a medieval spit roast, you'll actually see there is a roasting pan that catches the drippings from the roast, and those drippings would then be used to baste the roast as it rotates, as it roasts. But then you have that dripping pan clearly that you could then use to enhance the flavor, the sauce that you used to make your chicken. So yeah. There we have it, everyone. Lemon sauce for chickens or capons. But the recipe is much more involved than just the sauce. It's actually, gives us serving instructions. It actually says, pour it over.
This one's almost dead too.
I told you to charge things.
You did. Well, thankfully we're almost done.
Yeah, we're almost done. Okay, everyone. Sorry about that. Equipment failure. Okay, are there any final questions? We're going to try this baby and we'll let you know how it turns out. If there were questions and you're watching this as a recording, pop them in the comments. One last chance for any final questions before we part ways for the day. I would like to thank my patrons and my channel members. I'd like to thank all of you who super chatted, who gave me gifts and jewels, and all of you who really just asked such great questions. That was a fantastic experience today. Yesterday's medieval story time killed my soul a little bit. So this was very recuperative and restorative for me. Yeah. Yes, handsome.
Is the chicken sassined? I don't know what that means.
Is the chicken what?
Sassined?
Spelt how?
S-E-S-S-I-N-E-D.
S-E-S-S-I-N-E-D.
I'm not sure what that means.
I don't know what the question is the chicken sassined? And I don't actually know that word, which says something because I have a fairly formidable vocabulary in English. Could you explain what you mean by sassined, please? Sassined.
Oh, Tanya. Wow. Thank you, Tanya.
Oh, Tanya. Oh my God, Tanya. Wow. I really appreciate that. Seasoned. Seasoned. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to mock anyone's orthography.
Jesus. No, it's the internet.
Okay. Okay, I apologize. We were not trying to mock anyone. The chicken itself is not seasoned. The sauce is the flavor.
I thought it was a word I just didn't know. I'm a moron.
Okay, sorry. We were not trying to. I'm not trying to mock anyone's spelling. I apologize profusely. Really, really not. Apologize for that. Is it seasoned? No. So the sauce is seasoned. The sauce has spices, good spices in it, and I did add some salt to it.
How many would that feed?
How many would this feed? That is a good question. So this actually doesn't say. Sometimes these recipes do specify it's a mess for so many people. Like there's that torta parmigiana that I mentioned last weekend, the super pie, that is for one recipe makes 25 servings. How many would this serve? So it would depend. It would honestly depend on how many messes there are, how many courses there were in the meal. Sometimes these banquets could have 10 to 20 courses. And some of those courses would have multiple dishes in them. So the more courses you have, the more dishes you have, the smaller the servings that you actually. Did it die again?
Nope, it's still on.
The more the smaller the serving size. You know what I mean? So if you were eating just this with some bread and that's it, then, this would probably serve 4 people. But if it's being served as part of a meal with, other dishes, then it's going to serve more. So a head cook, a cook these days, and a cook then, look at you ruining my backdrop. Sorry, everyone.
I'll put
Sorry
this
about
back
that.
up.
You can tell it's real though, not a green screen. I'm not AI. That's not AI. This isn't AI. But a cook, one of the arts of cooking and managing a kitchen and managing a feast or a banquet or any meal is developing a sense of portions and serving size. And I have friends who've been, doing feasts for 100 to 200 people, medieval feasts for years. And they have spreadsheets where they have formulae built into it, whereby if the feast consists of this many dishes, then each portion size goes down to this many grams per person. Like they've got it down to a fine science. So yeah, how many people could this serve? It depends on what else is being served with it. In this particular recipe, it doesn't actually specify. Yep. Yes, Hans?
Do we have any side dishes?
Do we have any side dishes? Do we have any side dishes at the moment? Let me think about what's in the larder. I've got herbs, so I could make an herb salad. So salads in the 15th century, 14th and 15th century, tend to be made of herbs and not so much lettuce. So and I'm talking about parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme, burnet, rocket. I guess rocket is kind of used these days in salad. And all of those, they're really bitter but really pungent herbs, that would actually be the salad. So a medieval salad would actually be super nutrient dense, but also really, really flavorful. So I think this would actually, considering the density of this and the richness of this, I think an herb salad would be an excellent accompaniment. And as per the instructions for herb salads, they actually did dress them in olive oil and vinegar, just like we do, right, to this day. So that would, and I do have in my vegetable drawer, I do have large bunches of fresh green herbs because my herb monger sold them to me in very large quantities. So yeah, an herb salad would probably be a very good accompaniment for this. Otherwise, you see dishes like this on banquet menus, and there's banquet menus. So in this manuscript, we're included in the manuscript actually several banquet menus. So I can actually give you an example of what a 15th century banquet, of what it would have consisted. So for instance, oh, Jesus, at the Fable of Neptune, this was a feast that was held, which probably had quite a bit of performance in it. Oh my God. Yeah, 7 dishes. We've got lamprede cum sapore, anguille and pastilli, 7 plates of, it's, Jesus. These menus are absolutely, I'm going to have to actually go through and do some translations for this. But this one course has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dishes. One course in a 9-course feast has 7 dishes in it. So yeah. Let me see, are any of these actually nutritious side dishes? Oh, that's meat, that's fish, that's fish.
How often are you live?
That's meat. I go live quite a bit, actually. I go live at least 4 times a week, sometimes more. So I generally always do a medieval cooking party, and on Sunday, whether it's in the morning my time or the evening, I try to vary it to reach different audiences. I have medieval sewing parties. I have medieval story time. There's also the Medieval Buzz with Philip from Irish Medieval History, where we talk about whatever is hot in the history world, the medieval history world. This week, we'll be talking about the Inquisitions. Actually, not the Inquisition singular, because there wasn't one, there were many. And after yesterday's medieval story time, I was so frustrated by some of the very ignorant and clearly biased commentary that I have dove into the history of the Inquisitions in medieval Europe, and we will be talking about that along with some other hideous misconceptions about the Middle Ages on Wednesday with Philip from Irish Medieval History. That will be Wednesday morning, Seoul Standard Time, or middle of the night in Europe, or Tuesday evening for those of you in the Americas. Right, so I go live quite a bit. So yeah, if you've been enjoying this, double tap that screen and subscribe, and on the notification bell, if you actually want to be notified, for instance, when I do go live, then you should hit all on the notifications, not personalized, because personalized, then YouTube will decide what it is you should see when which of my videos you should then see, but it won't tell you every time I go live. But I do go live lots, multiple times per week. Okay, are there any final questions about our lemon chicken from 15th century Naples, or any other aspects of medieval cookery or medieval daily life before we part ways for the nonce? I will probably not be going live tomorrow. I will probably be going live on Tuesday my time, which would be Monday your time, though in the morning my time, in the evening your time, for a medieval sewing party, because I've now reached the point where I have to do lots of hand sewing on my new Burgundian style gown, lots of seams that need to be finished by hand, so I've got plenty of sewing to accomplish, and I prefer to do it with you all, talking about various aspects of medieval daily life and answering your questions.
So here's a funny thing. Can we have coffee?
Can you have coffee in the Middle Ages? No.
I mean, with us.
Oh.
So yeah, if you're in Daegu.
Yeah, sure. If you're in Daegu, South Korea, drop us.
They were asking about whether there's coffee in the Middle Ages.
Okay, yeah. So in Europe, no. So coffee comes from Ethiopia originally, and it actually is a relatively recent discovery in human civilization. And Ethiopians have only been drinking it for like 1,500 years-ish. And it took a long time for it to make its way across to Arabia, basically, and then to make its way up to the Ottoman Empire, and then into Europe. Coffee doesn't get to Europe until the 17th century.
What was your name?
I'm the Contessa of the Creative Contessa. Some of you know me as Rachel. And so coffee is a relatively recent introduction into the world, and yet it has, like potatoes and chili peppers, it has taken the world by storm. But in medieval Europe, not even in the Middle East, there was not coffee. It's a relatively recent introduction to the world. So what did they drink instead? They drank wine, nearly always diluted, never ever, almost never full strength. They drank ale, they drank beer, small ale, which would be like the second brewing. So almost more like a kombucha than like, the really strong beers that are now being sold as craft beers. They drank infused water. The Ménagier de Paris from 1391 actually provides several recipes for delightfully infused water, infused with really, nice herbs, fruit in some cases. So we know they drank that as a beverage, not just for health-giving reasons.
And I pinned it if people are interested in looking at that.
If you would like to purchase a copy of The Goodman of Paris, we have pinned it as one of the products for this live stream. Another way to support my work, because I do get a kickback for those shopping cart purchases. Full disclosure. Any other good questions, Handsome?
Have you given a tutorial on head coverings yet? I want to make one like yours.
There's a short video that shows how to put this on. I actually teach workshops, Zoom workshops on making this, and I keep saying I'm going to schedule one. I'm just going to do it.
You keep saying that.
I know I do. I'm going to schedule it for the end of May.
And then you keep saying, I'm going to do it.
I know. I will actually try to do it. It's a 3-part workshop, and it's all hand sewn, so I teach the basics. We teach how to draft it. We teach how to put it together. I teach all the stitches that you're going to need to make it. And we basically do that in a three-part Zoom workshop. And for those who can't attend all of the workshops while they're live on Zoom, I post the recordings, and then you can access the recordings at will. That will be advertised through my website, thecreativecontessa.com. One word. Great question, though. Yep. I don't really do many tutorials anymore. Live streams are pretty much the way it is. I do have a large catalog of very carefully researched, scripted, edited, post-edited videos on a wide array of topics, but unfortunately, those are not getting pushed by YouTube at all, so I'm pretty much live stream only these days. Plus shorts, because I can spin shorts off of the live streams, but YouTube is not pushing my horizontal content at all. In fact, you can look at videos into which I invested hundreds of hours of work, and they've maybe gotten 5,000 views in the last 5 years, so not really worth it. But the live streams seem to reach a much broader audience and get a lot more engagement. So there it is. Yep. Okay.
You mentioned medieval Irish history. What's that?
Oh, Medieval Irish History is a channel. Philip is one of my colleagues, one of my history tuber colleagues, and his channel is Irish Medieval History. So he and I do a once a week series called The Medieval Buzz, and it's basically where we go live together and we talk about a wide array of medieval topics. It's like a live stream podcast where we talk about medieval history, and it's also interactive like this, so we answer people's questions, of course, from the live chat, but we generally always have a topic that we're discussing, and the topic on Wednesday is going to be the Inquisitions, because I'm tired of the misinformation that is just being tossed around with wild abandon. It's just annoys me. Yes, the Inquisitions, they were bad. They should never have been founded, really, and their methods were terrible. But they weren't as bad as people have made them out to be, and God knows the death count was nowhere near as high as these insanely exaggerated numbers that people have been quoting at me. So we'll be talking about the Inquisitions on Wednesday morning Asia time, or Friday or Tuesday evening everywhere else in the world, more or less. Okay, everyone. Well, it is very late here. Well, no, it's very late, but it's late. It's late. It's not very late, but it's late because we are in Daegu, South Korea. So it is the very end of our day here. This has been a fantastic medieval cooking party. Again, I really thank you all for being such a great audience. After yesterday's horror show of a medieval story time, I had lost the faith a little bit. So I appreciate you all joining and being such great company for our exploration of 15th century Italian cuisine. We will taste it and let you know how it is. I've high expectations though. Okay, everyone, until next time, may your historical explorations be creative. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, everyone.